Good morning. It is October 18th, 10:01. I will now call this meeting to order. We will commence with the Pledge of Allegiance. You can have an imaginary flag. There's a flag in the corner. Yeah, okay.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. I will now commence with the roll call. Board Member Welsh.
Here.
Board Member Singletary.
Here.
Board Member Gonzalez.
Here.
Vice Chair Natoli.
Here.
Chair Wang.
Present.
Thank you. We have a quorum. All members are accounted for. It's my understanding the next item is a closed session. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. So sorry for those who just arrived.
Again, for being here today, it is 10:20. We are going to resume our open session and just going to give sort of a little bit of a reminder as to the overall participation. We are convening here a hybrid meeting, so there is virtual participation and in-person participation. As a courtesy, the public is invited to attend the meeting virtually via Zoom. And if you wanted to speak, you should have contacted Dr. Gold by 5 o'clock yesterday evening to specify that you had a virtual participation option that you were exercising and that you wanted to speak. And so after joining the meeting this morning and after having submitted a speaker card, you will be able to speak in the order that your card was received. We are prioritizing per item people who are speaking in the room. So folks who are in the room will be speaking first, and then those on the either public forum or agenda item will be speaking via Zoom. Members of the public have up to 3 minutes to speak on each item in the interest of allowing everyone to cover the business on the agenda. Please be advised that the chair does have the discretion to reduce the time limits per speaker for each agenda item. When you are speaking, please state your name clearly for the record at the beginning of your remarks. Quickly, the rules of conduct. The board will entertain comments only that are civil. Anyone who makes derogatory comments or targets individuals will be asked to sit down and given a warning by the chair of the board. If you are on Zoom, you will be given a warning, and then you will be removed if disruptive behavior continues. Those who are disruptive, again, will be removed from the warning. No warning is required if the individual is using force or threatening to use force against someone. So thank you for entertaining that. Again, we're back in closed session. Item number 5 is disclosure of ex parte communications from board members. We will start with the board members. Mr. Singletary? Nothing to report. Mr. Gonzalez? Mr. Welch? Vice Chair Natoli?
Other than the email communications from Mr. John Davis and Mr. Person, I don't believe I've received any person communication.
Thank you. And Chair? Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the consent item, approval of the meeting minutes from the July 19th, 2019, July 19th, 2023 meeting. Are there any items to discuss, revisions, corrections?
I know, not this time.
I have a couple items.
Okay.
There's just typos on 8A. It's supposed to say agendizing on the third line. So just a spelling error. And then I think on 9, 8. Oh, it's like you usually catch them, not me. And then on 8C, I think it's important to note that the item has been continued to allow time for Dudek and Hillcrest, Dudek being the GSA consultant, Hillcrest to develop a monitoring solution for the proposal to be consistent with the GSP. So I think it's important to note on why that item was continued to provide time.
Thank you. Any other items to correct? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Great. We'll do a roll call vote. Board Member Welsh,
Yes.
Board Member Singletary,
Yes.
Board Member Gonzalez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Natoli,
Aye.
Chair White.
Yes.
Great. Okay, the next item on our agenda is public forum. We have a number of items, a number of speakers during public forum today. The first person we have is Dr. Mark Gold, followed by Ms. Kathy Knight. I will put 3 minutes on the clock.
All right, I'll get started.
Go ahead.
I'm Dr. Mark Gold, Director of Water Scarcity Solutions at NRDC. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've spent most of my career working towards making the LA region, including Los Angeles, LA County, and Santa Monica, self-sufficient on local water supplies. As UCLA's Associate Vice Chancellor for Environment and Sustainability, I had the privilege of helping create and run the Sustainable LA Grand Challenge, Thriving in a Hotter, Drier Los Angeles. I was the PI on a series of studies that demonstrated the city could become local water self-sufficient by 2050. We published at least half a dozen papers on this effort. I also served on Mayor Garcetti's water cabinet and on the Metropolitan Water District Board for over 3 years. Also, as the former chair of Santa Monica's former Task Force on the Environment for 27 years, I authored the motion adopted by City Council to make the city local water self-sufficient by 2020. I give all of this as background for the following observations and recommendations. Number one, with climate crisis-inspired targets of 70% local water in LA by 2035 and 80% in LA County by 2045, we need to be bolder on conservation, water reuse, stormwater capture, and sustainable groundwater management, including pump and treat approaches. Number two, despite the region's successful conservation efforts, we can do a lot more, especially in reducing outdoor irrigation demand. The recent Governor Newsom signed law, AB 1572, banning the use of potable water for non-functional turf in commercial, industrial, and institutional land uses, as well as the State Water Resources Control Board's Conservation as a California Way of Life draft regulations, will move us forward boldly on conservation. Number three, other than low-impact development ordinance requirements for new and redevelopment, we barely scratched the surface on stormwater infiltration efforts to augment groundwater supplies, especially in this Santa Monica Basin area. Golf courses and schools are great candidates for stormwater capture and infiltration projects to augment groundwater supplies or reduce potable water demand. Also, golf courses can be good sites for packaged water recycling plants with water demands daily at those courses of 250,000 to 500,000 gallons per day at most courses. Props go to Riviera for the proposed stormwater capture, storage, and infiltration project to reduce potable demand. It is unconscionable that LA has spent over $23 million through Prop O money for the Penmar Park Cistern project, yet the flow is sent to Hyperion instead of used to irrigate Penmar Golf Course across the street because of a long-standing dispute with county health. No potable water should be used to irrigate golf courses or cemeteries. In LA, all public courses except Penmar and Rancho are using recycled water. Councilwoman Katie Yaroslavsky, chair of the Energy and Environment Committee on the LA City Council, has introduced a water conservation motion that includes assessment of banning the use of potable water at all golf courses and cemeteries. And the fourth area for today that could help your sustainable groundwater management efforts is the capture of dewatering discharges from subterranean parking lots and construction. Wrapping up, sites such as the Metro Wilshire subway with high groundwater along the Wilshire corridor discharge tens of thousands of gallons from Santa Monica Basin. The dewatering impact on the basin needs to be assessed as soon as possible. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Kathy Knight, followed online by John Anthony Davis.
Yeah, my name is Kathy Knight. I'm with the board of the Biona Ecosystem Education Project, and we've been working for a for 30 years to save and protect the Bayona wetlands ecosystem, which we're still working on. They still want to bulldoze it. But anyway, what I wanted to do is just to let you know that our group gives tours of the Bayona wetlands ecosystem. And so if anybody is interested in a tour, you can email me at Kathy, Kathy, Knight, Knight, 66@gmail.com. We will be happy to take you out and show you the wetlands. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is an online speaker, Mr. John Anthony Davis, followed by Patricia McPherson. Mr. Davis, you have been entered into the meeting. Can you hear us?
This is John Davis. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Okay. Agency representatives. The California legislature approved and the governor signed the Groundwater Sustainability Management Act into law. The state water code sets forth, the state water code specified the requirements to establish groundwater sustainability agencies. A legal agreement between parties is required in the form of a joint powers agreement, a memorandum of understanding, or other legal agreement. And you can find all of the details in the submission that I sent each and every one of you via email and to Mrs. Gold to include in the record. So I hope you may refer to that while I finish. A memorandum of understanding is not a legal agreement and is insufficient to establish a GSA. Here, the agencies could not agree to a memorandum of understanding, a joint powers agreement, or any other legal entity or any other legal agreement. Therefore, a GSA was not established and does not exist. The agencies, however, have represented to the public that a GSA was established through a memorandum of understanding, which has no force of law. The agencies have simply usurped the authority of the state, which is unlawful. I hereby request that this group cease and desist meeting if and until it complies with the water code to lawfully establish a GSA. To continue representing itself as a GSA is to knowingly and with intent continue defrauding the public. As a result of this activity, this group is unable to comply with other laws, such as the Public Records Act, the Records Retention Act, and other laws. Public funds directed to this group are untraceable. The purported Basin plan was only developed for the city of Santa Monica and not for the entire groundwater basin. Several criticisms of this plan have been made by really important entities such as the Union of Concerned Scientists. There has been no meaningful response. A public company has ran the meetings in substitution for the government. And what we really would like to know is why this happened. And it is pretty clear that it was not a mistake because the agencies could not agree to a legal, I'm wrapping up, could
Thank
not
you.
agree to a legal agreement, and therefore the attorneys for all agencies approved as to form an MOU that purports to be a legal contract. Please inform your respective city councils and the County Board of Supervisors of this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Patricia McPherson, followed by Joe Young.
She may be waiting for you to say she can proceed.
I think she has been promoted. You promoted her. Ms. McPherson, you have been promoted. You should be in the meeting. Can you hear us? Yes, your hand is up, Ms. McPherson. You may commence with your comments. You're on mute. If you're speaking, we cannot hear you. Ms. McPherson, can you hear us? You see that your hand is raised. You have been promoted to a meeting participant. Are you able to?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Fine. I was just now promoted, so thank you for doing that. Yes, Patricia McPherson Grassroots Coalition, we have spent the past 30 years working to protect the groundwater resources and wetland resources here in our basin area and elsewhere. And I would like to draw your attention to the comments made in the that are now in the record. And I support the comments made by Dr. Mark Gold with regard to there's a great need to do far more. However, it appears that all of the work that has been done was done under an RFP that the city of Santa Monica had with the company Dudek on behalf of the city of Santa Monica. And while I appreciate the work that the city of Santa Monica is doing, there needs to be a legitimate GSA that has oversight for the entire basin, which has not occurred. I support the comments made just now by John Davis and the need to adhere to the water code for the formation of a GSA. 10723.6, which has not occurred, and that in particular, Santa Monica's attorney, Ms. Cola, addressed at the last meeting, citing that no legal agreement had been reached because the cities could not come to a legal agreement. Well, I understand that. I understand the problems associated with that, but that is the requirement to be a GSA. All of our Public Record Act requests have been deferred willy-nilly, even asking for the purported secretary of this body. We have been told to seek it out ourselves individually. So when Ms. Natoli cited that she ex parte was our emails, those emails are in the record, and we have sent them out knowing that we were told by Ms. Gold that we had to individually send it out to each and every member of the of this group. So we have done that, and we have done that again. So the very fact that Ms. Natoli is commenting at that as ex parte, I think signifies the fact that there is confusion here, and this does need to be addressed properly. These issues were all raised at the last meeting, none of which have been addressed. And we would like to see them addressed. We would like to have a meeting that actually sits down and we're able to go over each and every one of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We have no more items for the public forum.
Before you
Yes.
proceed,
You have a comment?
yes, I just like to comment. Ex parte means outside of the public hearing, and if I receive a direct email communication, that's outside of the public hearing. So I will disclose that, whether there is no judgment or determination on my part, whether that is legal or illegal, whether that relates to whether the GSA is legally formed or not legally formed. It's a communication that occurred outside of the public hearing, so I report that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Natoli.
Sorry, it's not.
Was there, is there one more speaker that you mentioned?
Are you?
Yes, I'm sorry, correct, Mr. Young.
I just wanted to raise a quick procedural point. My name is Jason Haas. I'm counsel for Hillcrest. The question and I guess objection is that we had arranged for a court reporter to attend this meeting remotely in order to record what was said. And she was instructed by Jane Gray that she would not be allowed to remain on the line.
That is not correct. I responded that I didn't have authorization to promote that person to a panelist. Panelist is a different sort of portion of the meeting and implies that there is some sort of need for that person to be directly involved in the proceedings of the meeting. The court reporter has messaged me. They have no problem, I would think, accessing the audio.
Right, so they can listen and watch.
They
the
can
meeting,
certainly
They just can't
certainly
present a
listen.
comment.
But a panelist is somebody who is an active participant in the meeting.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
And this meeting is being recorded.
Understood.
Thank you. So I'm sorry. Thank you for saying that, Mr. Singletary. Our next speaker is Joe Young.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can certainly hear you.
I will be brief. At some point, all of the legal requirements for the establishment under the Groundwater Sustainability Act will have been met. My concern is the boundaries of the area subject to this act. I want to make sure that our precious Ballona wetlands are included with boundaries that will be set by the act. It is extremely important that the boundary of this groundwater basin be accurately measured and all legal requirements met in pursuit of protection of that groundwater of the Ballona wetlands. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That does conclude our public forum. The next item on our agenda is item number 8A. These are informational items in item number 8. Item number 8A is discussion on questions and research results that came out of Vice Chair Natoli's discussion with the Grassroots Coalition.
Thank you. I submitted my questions so long ago, I can't remember. Too much has happened between then and now. So I'm hoping to be able to get answers to those 13 questions that I asked, and I'm not sure, Dr. Weinberger, if you are lead on this.
You can direct your questions to me, yeah.
Do I need to read them to you, or can you just, how would you prefer we proceed?
I think it's probably best to read them just for the record.
Yes.
Yes, I think for the record. So my first question really is more, gosh, I don't know what this means, and these terms keep coming up. What is the difference between an aquifer and an aquitard?
So an aquifer is a geologic formation that holds and transmits water freely. So it tends to be a coarse grain formation, a gravel, a sand formation that water can move through freely. And it tends to be, if you're going to drill a well for production purposes, that's where you would screen your well, because you can pump water from an aquifer. An aquitard is a geologic formation that tends to be a much finer grain, so a clay or a silt, where there is water there, but the water doesn't move very freely. So if you were to screen that same well in a clay, you would have trouble actually getting the water up into your pump and out of your well.
All right, I'll develop some way of my brain being able to differentiate those in the future. Thank you. My second question, and again, these questions come from my meetings with the Grassroots Coalition, the Ballona Wetlands Education Group, and Audubon, Los Angeles. Is it accurate that water pumped for Playa Vista is not included in our groundwater sustainability plan model?
So the groundwater model that was used in the groundwater sustainability plan was developed by the USGS, the United States Geological Survey, for for the entire Los Angeles coastal plain basin. And we focused on the Santa Monica sub-basin portion of that. So it's a basin scale model, which is the appropriate scale that is discussed in the SGMA regulations, SGMA being the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And that model was calibrated to water levels measured in the Santa Monica Basin. USGS, when they built that model, collected groundwater production data where they could find it. So they had production data from the city of Santa Monica, they had production data from, I believe there's a cemetery that pumps groundwater. They did not have production data from areas in Playa Vista. So it was not explicitly modeled in the USGS model of the basin that was used. However, because the model was calibrated to the groundwater levels, the measured groundwater levels, pumping throughout the basin, the impacts of that pumping is accounted for in the model. It's just not explicit at a particular well.
So if it's not specific for a particular well, how do we determine how much of that is, or can we determine how much is Playa Vista and how much is everything else in the basin?
The model doesn't make a determination on how much is being pumped anywhere. That would be an input to the model if it's known, right? So that would be, the USGS could reach out to a pumping entity and say, please provide us with your pumping records. So that's a forcing in the model that's used to develop whether or not the model is behaving similarly to what's actually known about the groundwater conditions.
All right. Then I'm going to skip over question 3 because that's really a follow-up to question 2. Question 3, if it is not included, why don't we count Playa Vista pumped water in our GSP model? Actually, let me leave that in. Why don't we include it? Even if USGS didn't have the numbers, why don't we include that?
Well, we include it in the sense that we developed measurable objectives and minimum thresholds to ensure sustainability in the subbasin. And those measurable objectives and minimum thresholds are in fact measurable water levels, or in some cases measurable chloride concentrations. And that's what SGMA directs us to do. The model is used to test conditions in the basin moving forward, understand what increases in pumping or decreases in pumping may do to water levels and water quality. But we don't use the model to assess sustainability in and of itself. Rather, we assess sustainability based on the minimum thresholds and measurable objectives that were determined as part of the GSP process.
And so any data that we may have on groundwater from Playa Vista could be put in to a model, but developing our objectives and thresholds, we determine that based on the basin-wide model.
We do, and additional data is always welcome and can always be used to refine the model. And there are many points in the future where we will be asked to refine the model, to re-examine our assumptions that went into the original GSP. We've got a 5-year update that'll be due in 3 years. And so that any new data can be used to help with that process.
My question 4, does Playa Vista have a permit to pump and dump their groundwater? And does the GSA have any authority over where the water is dumped?
So there are existing Regional Water Quality Control Board permits for dewatering in the Playa Vista area, as well as for pump and treat operations, because there's groundwater contamination in the Playa Vista area. Those, as I said, those were issued by the regional board. The GSA does not have authority to change those permits. That authority rests with the regional board.
All right, so even if they have a permit to pump and dump out of the Santa Monica subbasin, we can't, as a GSA, infringe on those permits. Is that what you're saying? So we can't say, no, you can't dump here anymore, or no, you can't pump here anymore, because they already have their permits from the regional board.
Those are existing permits and that authority lies with the board. I will also say that Sigma and the GSP really address future groundwater conditions. So permits and pumping that's occurred prior to 2015 is an existing groundwater condition under Sigma.
Right, okay. My question 5, are there other groundwater producers in the basin not included in the model? We don't include Playa Vista. Are there other groundwater producers we don't include in the model?
So we've heard about it already. Many of the golf courses are also not explicitly modeled, but the water levels in the model were used to calibrate the model. Sorry, the measured water levels were used to calibrate the modeled water levels. So again, not explicitly modeled. There are no cells in the model that have a well pumping from them at a specific golf course currently, but that could be a refinement to the model moving forward as well.
So golf courses, and there was a mention.
The cemetery, yeah.
And again, these would be people who were either had their pumping rights or had permits prior to 2015.
These are wells, independent of any permitting or pumping. These are wells that the USGS did not get the data for to be able to explicitly include in the model.
Okay. My question 6, do the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and our adopted GSP give us the authority to request water data from pumpers within the basin?
Yes, the GSA has the authority to request groundwater production data from pumpers in the basin. Typically that's done through legislative work by the board. So an ordinance would be adopted to make that request, something similar. I'm not the person to talk public policy, but yeah, you have the authority under Sigma to make that request.
If I can jump in here, I believe for us to do that right now in our GSP, we require new wells over 32 acre feet per year to be monitored, to monitored. But if we wanted people to report on existing wells, we can. We just need to pass a ordinance as part of this board in our procedures to do so. So right now, you can request, but we have no ability to enforce and require them to do that. We can only ask and help them provide info, but if we pass an ordinance, then they're legally bound to require.
Okay, thank you. Question 7, did we use the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's EIR for their proposed alterations to Ballona wetlands for our GSP? And how much did our GSP rely on the EIR?
So we definitely read the EIR and the extensive studies that went into characterizing the habitat, the subsurface conditions in the Playa Vista, in the wetlands area, I should say. And we relied on that existing work that had been done to characterize that area. But when it comes to determining sustainability within the subbasin, we looked at large changes in groundwater levels that have occurred in the subbasin as a result of changing pumping conditions over time. And we can see those changes translate into monitoring wells at some distance from some of the pumping centers. So we looked all the way to monitoring wells in the vicinity of the Ballona wetlands, and we did not see any correlation between water level changes in the pumping centers and water levels at the Ballona wetlands. So that's what led us in the GSP to say that the Ballona wetlands are not currently being impacted by groundwater production. in the subbasin, but there are some safeguards in the GSP, so if groundwater production moves closer to the wetlands, there would be additional requirements to monitor water levels in that area and to better understand any connection between future production and water levels in Bayona.
So independently, we looked at water levels from different data.
Correct.
Okay, and that's really what we would have needed, was the water levels.
Correct.
Did a lawsuit decertify Fish and Wildlife's Bayona wetlands, EIR, so now we must redo the parts of our GSP analyzing a groundwater surface water connection for the Bayona wetlands.
Sorry to butt in. Melanie Torrey, I'm counsel for Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. A lot of these questions are legal in nature and should be directed to counsel. Each GSA member has their own attorney. I think, you know, to the extent you'd like answers on this, obviously you can discuss it with LA County Council, or collectively, each of the 5 GSA attorneys can discuss it and come back to the board, either in closed or open session to discuss legal matters. But I don't want to leave it to a non-lawyer to answer inherently legal questions over the scope of GSA authority, what the law says, and how that moves forward, or the impact of the lawsuit.
So I can't ask question 8. Let's see.
10 probably.
No, I think that's, no, I don't, I think that's.
I think 8 and then probably 6 is still really a legal question, the scope of your authority.
I think 10 is
Oh, right.
more an evaluation. 11 looks okay, 12 looks.
Well, on 10, I will tell you that
And 13 looks
EIR
okay.
involves ongoing litigation between CDFW.
Okay, and do the other counselors in the room agree? Because if we're talking 5 different agencies,
Yeah.
perhaps I should listen to 4 other counsel as to whether they agree.
So was it the concern on 8 and 10?
That a non-attorney should not be answering any questions about lawsuits and EIRs.
And really, it's does the GSA have any authority over where water is dumped? 5, sorry, not 5. 6,
Speaking for the city of
7, 8, 10.
It's okay to ask the question, get it on the record that you've asked the question, and then you can give direction to ask legal counsel and to come back with a response.
Okay, so can the attorneys in the room then agree which are the questions that an attorney should be answering? I want to make sure I understand which questions I need to wait on an answer for.
I think we can agree that the questions that do involve some sort of legal analysis as to legality or interpretation of the statute should be handled by the attorney.
Okay, so
The
that would
information
be,
about facts, like what did they use in the GSP, is a factual, not a factual question. So if you just want to get the questions on the record, and then the attorneys can look at it maybe and just put in mind, we can come back for the consensus.
okay, so.
Yeah, and I don't know if Beverly Hills, Culver City, Lake County, they have any further thoughts.
No further comments from city officials.
Okay, so we're talking about 6. I'm sorry, could you go through again which ones you believe are something that will need to come back next quarter?
Yeah, so the question of 4, does the GSA have any authority over where the water is dumped? That inherently is GSA legal authority. Number 6 is asking for to explain that sigma, so that's a legal question. 8, about decertification of a lawsuit. 10 is kind of borderline, that's on existing litigation.
But if it's just an evaluation of the existing EIR, is that really a
It says,
legal
do we
question?
agree? So I don't know, do we agree that has to be a board decision, but you can get Dudek's impression of it, but as to whether the board agrees.
Speaking for the city of Santa Monica, I do think it's difficult to make sort of snap off the cuff responds to your question, and therefore I think it would be fine if the attorneys just looked at the questions and had some consensus about this and got back to you.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you, Ms. Cola.
These are very weighty questions.
What I would suggest then is, since the questions are posted in the board packet for today, that I just stop talking and the attorneys get together and talk about which questions can be answered and which can't. And then next quarter, it's on the agenda again, and we hopefully have answers then.
So we'll continue the item for next quarter.
I think we need to continue the item.
But we'll need 5 lawyers from the 5 entities to decide, come in agreement which questions need to be answered by legal, which to be answered by our GSA consultant. So that's clearly separated for our next meeting, and for legal to provide responses for those questions as well.
That's my motion.
Okay,
That's my
I guess I'll
motion.
second. I'm glad to speak in my.
Even though this is a discussion item or an information item, we probably need to vote on that.
If you're gonna continue it, I think that's fine, on the motion.
Yep.
That's fine. Okay, so, Vice Chair Natoli, you made a motion. It was seconded by Chair Wang. I will do a roll call vote. Board Member Welsh.
Yes.
Board Member Singletary.
Yes.
Board Member Gonzalez.
Yes.
That's unanimous. So we will move, before we move to second informational item, I do have 4 public speakers for agenda item A. We'll go back. First is Ms. Kathy Knight, followed by Ms. Patricia McPherson.
Yeah, these issues are very important because we need to have groundwater monitoring wells down there at the Basin Wetlands area, and that area needs to be put into one continuous area because it's part of the same area. And the water there under the Basin Wetlands aquifer has been declared freshwater drinking water. So we should not be ignoring it, and it should have monitoring wells there so that Playa Vista or anything else starts pumping water out, that we will know that that's depleting our drinking water. So I think that's very important, that the monitoring, the groundwater monitoring goes to the whole area, includes the Basin Wetlands aquifer there. And there are many groundwater sustainability plans statewide that can be looked at, and I guess that's pretty much what I had to say. That we need to cover it with the same issues and the same monitoring and the same studies as the rest of this basin. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Patricia McPherson, followed by Jeanette Fosberg. Ms. McPherson, you've been entered into the meeting. Please unmute yourself to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, Patricia McPherson, Grassroots Coalition. Again, following up on the list of questions. Number 1, at the last meeting, which we provided a recording to you of that meeting, we raised the issues of the legal aspects of this body of people, and raised to you the issues of the need for being able to do proper Public Record Act requests and adherence to the Records Retention Act, which we had no body with which to go to in order to put forward a Public Record Act request. We ultimately had to go to each and every city. That is also part of what is a problem here, is that each and every city, even the city councils, are not aware of what's going on with this body. So the outreach has been lacking. We have been taking people up to the bluffs with tours and understanding, including from Culver City, including from the city of Santa Monica, multiple council members, that they are not aware of what's really going on here, and they need to be informed. Dudek made a comment with regard to not having information, and at the last meeting, we were told that, and now it appears that our information is being submitted and being contained. Prior to that, our information hasn't been, and it hasn't been addressed by this body. Dudek explained to you, I believe, that there was no information showing there were problems from dewatering. That is inaccurate. The California Coastal Commission was in litigation. Our grassroots coalition prevailed in litigation that the Coastal Commission participated with us in showing that the hydrology of Ballona had been harmed by the drainage of Ballona, by Playa Vista, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife. We also have a letter that we provided to this body that cited, was a letter from the Department of Fish and Wildlife itself, Betty Courtney, citing there was damage to the hydrology of Ballona because of the lack of water input put out by Playa Vista. I'd also like to raise the point that Grassroots Coalition simply asked the Water Board when a permit is coming up for reaffirmation. We raised the issue regarding a permit that the water that was being dewatered and was going to be sent out to Hyperion, that this is a waste of water. The Water Board simply agreed, and the permit was rejected for Playa Vista to send that water. It was then sent into the riparian corridor. These are the types of situations that aren't being discussed by anyone in this group. This is the type of thing that is not brought to your attention by the company Dudek, that now does work on behalf of all of you, and that we need to be able to sit down and discuss the issues of all the data and information that we have provided that has not seen the light of day with all of you. We have proven this out left and right, that there is harm that has happened to this area. The story map that was provided to you by John Davis also shows the information showing harm.
Ms. McPherson, your time has expired. If you would please wrap up.
Okay, well, in a wrap up, we do need to continue this, and thank you for that. And we would like to follow up with presentations in order to really address these issues. And by the way, Mr. Wang, we cannot hear you out here when you speak. So if you could correct that, it'd be much appreciated. Thank you.
The next speaker is Ms. Jeanette Vosberg, followed by Margot Griswold. Ms. Vosberg, you have been promoted as a panelist temporarily to speak. Please unmute yourself. Ms. Vosberg, can you hear us? You are on mute.
Hello?
Yes. We can hear you.
Okay, I will speak on item 8.
Your name again, just for the record, please.
Not now. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, are you speaking on the agenda item? Ms. Vosberg?
She said item 8.
This is item 8A. Okay, I will remove, if you're not going to speak, I will remove you from the meeting, and you will just be an attendee. Okay. So the next item on the agenda, or I'm sorry, Margot Griswold. So Margot, I'm going to promote you to a panelist as soon as you are joining the meeting. Please unmute yourself and feel free to speak. Can you hear us?
Good morning, Dr. Margot Griswold, longtime observer and advocate for the Bayona wetlands. I'm representing the Los Angeles Audubon Society. We have one of the oldest education programs at the Bayona wetlands. And we represent our members and supporters, around 4,000 people. What I would just like to say is I'm glad we're continuing this to get some answers. I think there's a sort of intersection between what Dr. Mark Gold was mentioning about the preciousness of our water and how we can capture that water, and what the GSA might be able to do in terms of using the Bayona wetlands to contain water that currently is being sent out to the Bayona flood control channel and out to the bay. We're losing valuable groundwater that is being pumped by permit. We're not disputing any of the permits. We're just disputing, can't we come together and use that water at a quite naturally accepting area, the Bayona wetlands. And this is our main question, at least for Audubon, is how did DUDEC assess the groundwater dependent ecosystem at Bayona wetlands, which they didn't do until we brought this point up. And I work with groups and other consultants statewide, and they tell me repeatedly that one of the reasons, the main reason for many GSAs, GSPs being rejected by the water resources is they have not adequately assessed groundwater dependent ecosystems and the interconnected surface and groundwater. This has not been done at the Bayona wetlands. So I welcome us looking more closely. It's an opportunity. It's not a negative, it's an opportunity, really, a very positive opportunity for this body to look at. We, of course, are engaged with the LA Regional Water Quality Control Board about various actions and items on the pumping, the dewatering, on drainage of valuable fresh water. So let's look at it in a positive light. Thank you.
Thank you. So I do have two attendees with raised hands. Ms. Vosberg, are you interested in speaking? Go ahead. You are promoted temporarily to a panelist. You are allowed to speak. Please take yourself off mute. Ms. Vosberg? Are you able to hear us? I see your hand is up. I have entered you back in temporarily as a panelist. If you would like to take yourself off mute, you can speak. I've asked you to unmute. Are you able to unmute? Can you hear us? We cannot hear you. If you wouldn't mind communicating via the chat, I think that would be easiest.
Hello.
There you
Hello.
are. Yes. We can hear you.
Now you,
We can hear you. Now we're not able to hear you. If you could please put your comment in the chat, I think that would be helpful. I do have you speaking for this item and item 8B.
okay.
We can hear you
What
now.
what I'm trying to read is Daryl Grayson, President's letter to Supervisor Holly Mitchell. I'm writing you now on behalf of United Homeowners Association to request that you approve a directive to the LA County Groundwater Sustainability Agency member representative, Miss Gina Natoli, to support as part of fulfillment of the Sustainable Agency member representative, support as part of fulfillment of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, a stringent, sincere groundwater dependent ecosystem evaluation of Bionah Wetlands Ecological Reserve and its environs within the Santa Monica Groundwater Basin. The Department of Water Resources has acknowledged Bionah Wetlands Ecological Reserve as a groundwater dependent ecosystem. Thus far, no prudent, sincere GDE evaluation has been performed on the Bionah Wetlands Ecological Reserve. Therefore, while such protective evaluation is required under SGMA, it is important to have diligent performance of the protocol set forth by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, which is protocol the Department of Water Resources recommends for evaluation of groundwater dependent ecosystem. Thus far, there has been a groundwater sustainability plan sent to the Department of Water Resources that has not been approved. The evaluation and plan focus on the drinking water wells of the city of Santa Monica, while the lower portion of Santa Monica groundwater basin has been essentially left out of evaluation for protection of Bionah wetlands as a groundwater dependent ecosystem. The GSA plan notes that there is currently a large data gap for saltwater intrusion between the coast and the lower portion of the Santa Monica groundwater basin. Bionah wetlands is situated within this lower portion of the Santa Monica groundwater basin. There currently exists a large data gap for monitoring the saltwater intrusion potentials in this part of the basin. Unfortunately, Bionah's fresh groundwater and surface water is being continually diverted and drained either out to sea or is being sent to the LA City sanitary sewer by CDFW and the Playa Vista development. None of the documentation of these occurrences has been included in the SGMA planning effort via Dudak Company. The company hired in 2022 by the city's agencies engaged in the planning for the Santa Monica groundwater basin, which has been led by the city of Santa Monica by
Ms. Vosberg,
Mr.
if you wouldn't mind wrapping your comments up, please.
Okay, I'm almost finished. And Dr. Lizette Gold. At this point in time, it appears that there was no GSA consultant to perform the SGMA evaluation of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Plan that was submitted to the Department of Water Resources by the January 2022 deadline.
Thank you, Ms. Vosberg.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board, I have Mr. Joe Young repeatedly raising his hand. He's not responding to the chat. Neither do I have a speaker card. Do you want to allow him to make comment? Okay. Yes. So, Mr. Young, I'm going to promote you to a panelist. And once you're promoted to panelist, please feel free to unmute yourself to speak. Can you hear us? Mr. Young?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay. I have no additional comments to make except that your presenters that spoke this morning and so far have all made it very clear that the Bionah wetlands needs protection. And we simply must have a very thorough evaluation of the groundwater basin before we make decisions that might irretrievably harm it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda this morning is informational item 8B, discussion on Riviera Country Club stormwater use grant.
Good morning, directors and members of the public. This is a presentation on the Riviera Country Club stormwater use grant, as Jane was saying. I am here to provide board with some information on a project that infiltrates stormwater into the groundwater basin. This project started as part of the Enhanced Watershed Management Project for an NPDES MS4 permit for the Santa Monica Bay watershed. This has been worked on in detail by other people in the room. I was not part of developing the conceptual design, and I'm here to simply provide an update on the project. It is located at the Riviera Country Club, which you can see. It's in the kind of center left of the map. And it's a private country club, and there's 30% of their water is pumped from groundwater and the rest is imported. And then this is from one of the reports, a schematic from one of the reports. That's the project concept. The goal of the project is to divert water from the Santa Monica Canyon Channel for the purposes of irrigating the golf course, allowing infiltration into the groundwater basin, and preventing water quality issues in Santa Monica Bay. During dry weather flows, water would be diverted to an existing 350,000 gallon tank and treated, and then that would be used for irrigation of the golf course, and then released into a dry wash that it's historically what the Santa Monica Canyon channel ran through, and now it's like a feature of the golf course. The rate of release would be calibrated to match the infiltration rate of the soil in the dry wash. And then for wet weather flows, a 1 million gallon tank is planned to be constructed with a permeable base for storage, infiltration through the tank bottom, and extended release into the dry wash. This is being brought to the board's attention because it is an example of a project that is both improving water quality and reducing the reliance on imported water without additional groundwater pumping. This concludes my summary. Does the board have any questions at this time?
I was trying to figure out the procedure, I guess. Do we go to our question comments first?
Yes, you will have deliberation first, and then we can open it for public.
Yeah, I'll just start with comments like this. Questions. The information is provided by Riviera, I'm assuming, for this in terms of the project and their intent.
For the project, I found it in a report that's okay. The reference. So it's like multiple cities and then consulting, group of consultants.
Yeah, so I guess the comment I have on this is exactly the type of project, right, that will help our basin to reduce pumping for golf course use. As you heard public comments earlier, that LA is motioning to move that way as well. Potentially state legislature will be moving there down the road to decrease pumping and portable water use at golf courses or other facilities. I guess I'm curious, like our colleague from LA, do they have anything you want to add or any information on this project? Given that it's probably, I think this is our service, LA service area.
So what's, a couple of questions. This is based on a concept report developed a couple of years back. Do we know the status of the project? Has there been any communications that would add to our understanding of where Riviera is at with the project? I see a title on the agenda, use grant. So I'm sure this was triggered by some current grant that was awarded to Riviera.
Right.
Can you share more?
So the most recent report that I looked at is from 2018. And then why it was being brought up today is that Riviera got it, for this project, they received grant money for the project. So that's why, since it's in the sub basin,
You're not a speaker yet.
Well, I mean, I didn't sign up for public comment, but I'm just hearing people don't know much about it, so I'll just sign up for public.
Yeah, please do. I think it gets confusing if there's discussion.
Yeah, I do have some questions about the project, and hearing your presentation today, Amy, I'm not sure you'll have the answers to the questions, but I'm wondering, so the Santa Monica Canyon Channel, does it provide flows that reach the bay? And are those flows important for any habitats or ecosystems or other downstream beneficial users?
Right, I'm,
Just let me know if you don't know yet.
yeah, no, I didn't work on concept design, so I don't know.
And then my second question, where is the runoff going now?
I have an idea, but I don't want to say exactly because I don't have a full answer.
That's fine. And then my third question, what would the captured stormwater be used for? How much irrigation water would this project replace? So those are my questions on this.
Right, I don't know it off the top of my head. It's in the report though.
Thank you.
Jefferson, do you have any question, comments?
Yes, so the grant or the project lead is the country club or is it the city of LA?
I believe it's, I know that it's a joint grant. I don't know.
So it sounds like the country club is proactively going after this project and grant. I just wanted that clarification.
Dr. Walsh, any question, comments on this matter? No. Well, let's go to public comments and then we'll come back to discussion. We're going to go on public, maybe we'll provide additional input for the board here.
So our first speaker, who's in the room, yeah, it's Dr. Gold.
All right, sorry, I jumped out of my sheets and stuff like this. So Dr. Mark Gold, NRDC again. So here's the scoop on the project. Couple things. It's a 303D listed impaired water right in front of the Santa Monica Canyon storm drain, right? So it's absolute requirement to make sure that the runoff is not polluted enough to be hitting the beach. I can say this, literally my dissertation was on this many decades ago on the health risks of swimming in front of that drain, as well as the Pico Ganner drain and other places. This was the Santa Monica Bay epidemiology study of 1995. Subsequent to that, City of Los Angeles, Bureau of Sanitation, working with the county, has put in a diversion project around Short Avenue, right in that area, within the drain. They put in a berm, they pump behind the berm, and then into the Hyperion system. So that keeps the low flows of polluted runoff off the beach, which has turned that beach from an F beach on the Gila Bay Beach Report Card to an A beach during dry weather. So it's led to tremendous improvement. But the nuisance flows are still there, and Riviera has been a pretty significant component of that. This was actually looked at by the City of Los Angeles. It was not eligible for PROPO funding because it's on private property. I sat on the PROPO advisory committee for 15 years for the City of LA. And so I think much big surprise to me, I was reading somewhere that Jackie Irwin, who's the assemblywoman for that district, was able to, in a really tough budget year, get like $8 million out of this year's state budget. Remember, there's a $31 billion deficit this year, and somehow got $8 million for the Riviera Country Club to do this project, which has been discussed on and off for over a decade, to be doing this sort of work to get them. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think it gets them to about 30% imports, if done properly on their irrigation side. So it's a pretty significant project. The state funds, I think, pay for roughly a half to a third of the project overall, and Riviera does the rest. So anyway, so that's the overall. It just shows you when you have these big open spaces like golf courses, the potential to do innovative things on water supply is pretty tremendous. And so this is an example of one, obviously, within your watershed. Hope that helps.
If I could ask you a question.
Yeah.
Dr. Mark Gold on that. So it sounds like this has been in the works for quite some time, it sounds like. So they opted for these type of projects rather than, say, increase additional pumping that they're currently, like 30%, I think, is demands met on groundwater. So they're implementing these type of projects to decrease their demand on groundwater, not increasing groundwater pumping while still serving the golf course needs.
Right, they're trying to do a more sustainable water management within there. And let's face it, if it's a successful enough project, you know, I mean, they're also reducing, you know, purchases of DWP water, right? And so that's something they're looking to do as well, I'm sure.
Do you know what stage that project is in addition to just the funding?
I just know the funding. I don't know at this point whether it's 2 years out or how long it's going to take.
I was wondering if it's worthwhile for us to maybe invite them to talk about their project when they're ready.
Yeah, I actually thought that was happening this morning. That's one of the reasons I was still sticking around. I wanted to hear their perspective, but anyway, so that's what I.
So that would be my recommendation. Actually, is invite or reach out to Riviera to invite somebody from them to talk about their project stages, where it's at, and goals, etc.
We can do that.
Does that need to be a motion?
No, no action.
Okay.
And I'd just like to make sure that when projects like this come up, we do think about these other questions, downstream beneficial users, et cetera. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dr. Gold.
So our next speaker is Ms. Jeanette Vosberg, followed by John Davis. Ms. Vosberg, I'm promoting you to panelist, allowing you to speak. Please unmute. You are still unmute. Go ahead and unmute yourself so we can hear you. Ms. Vosberg, you are a panelist, have been promoted temporarily. Please unmute yourself so we may hear you. Are you able to unmute? Can you hear us? Okay, while you're figuring that out, I'm going to bring Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis, I'm going to promote you temporarily, allow you to speak. Please unmute yourself.
Okay.
Go ahead, we can hear you. Mr. Davis, we can hear you.
I'm sorry, could you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I received an email from Ms. Gold yesterday acknowledging.
Mr. Davis, please.
Is it on the Riviera
agenda item? Yes, if it's agenda item 8A or 8B, please just provide your comments. That would be helpful.
Well,
Okay,
it's
thank
8B,
you.
right? We already passed 8A.
Go ahead.
Let me know when I may speak.
Go ahead.
Okay, I received an email from Ms. Gold acknowledging that I would be able to speak on item 8, all items, and I was disallowed from speaking on item A. So let me just read this.
Mr. Davis, there are a number of different items under 8. We had agenda item 8A, which we closed. I have you signed up for 8B. So it's fine, we'll allow you to speak, but there are a number of agenda items under 8. So please specify which item you're speaking on.
I did receive an email from Ms. Gold, and I was going to speak on all of the items. 8 means all of the items, not just one or another, but all of the items.
Okay,
So,
it actually doesn't. So we'll allow you, if you're letting me know now you're going to speak on all sub items under 8, that's
yes.
fine. Okay.
Yes, that's good. Thank you very much. Okay, first of all, a motion cannot be voted on without first entertaining public comment. And you just made a motion and you're not allowed to do that. Thank you, Ms. Natoli, for asking a legal question. Who is the legal counsel for this GSA? In order to create a Groundwater Basin Sustainability Plan, a GSA must be first established. Here it was not. The problem with the use of this model is that the RFP or request.
I'm sorry, Mr. Davis, this is not pertinent to the agenda item. Public forum is the time at which items that are not on the agenda may be addressed. Unfortunately, you're making comments that are not germane to the items being discussed currently.
If I may.
No, you may not, actually. The requirements are clear. Public forum is for items not on the agenda. You have not spoken during public forum, and agenda items that you appear to be referring to, you're not making comments relevant to those agenda items.
Okay, I'm commenting on Ms. Natoli's remarks on item A.
That is not the agendized item.
You just said I could comment on item A right now.
You can comment, your comment must be restricted to the agendized items themselves.
Your comment is not related to any of the items under 8A, B, C, or D. We're currently on 8B, and your comment is not related to item 8B, the Riviera Country Club Stormwater Use Grant. And so we typically allow public comments after each item is heard. 8A, as you heard, that public comment took place, is closed. We're currently on 8B, right? If you have a public comment pertaining to that item, now's the time to make that public comment related to the item, and so forth. So if your comment is not related to that, unfortunately, now is not the time for that.
I do want to enter into the record, I received a email from Mr. Joe Young. He had asked to talk about concern on legitimacy of the GSA agency. If you look at your email, I responded back saying that would be public forum, item 7. It would not come under item 8. So I tried to clarify with you the appropriate place to put your public comment. Do you have that email? I would look for that.
This is John Davis.
John Davis.
Oh, John Davis, okay. Oh, this is, I only have from Joe Young on item 8 for concerns about legitimacy of the agency. Okay. I tried to address everyone that was asking on that one. All right.
Okay, I will make my comments on 8B. This agency cannot.
I'm sorry, Mr. Davis, that is not a comment. 8B is Riviera. That is not a germane comment. I'm going to unfortunately not be able to allow you to speak as your comments are not related to agenda item 8B.
Ma'am, you didn't hear my comment.
Is it related to Riviera?
You have no idea because I did not make my comment.
Is your agenda item or is your speaking topic related to agenda item 8A? Yes or no? 8B.
Yes.
It's related to Riviera?
It's 8A, 8B, and
No, we are done with 8A. If
Okay.
you have an item, I'm going to have to remove you.
I will speak to 8B only.
Okay.
Riviera.
Right, before you begin, if you're speaking to Riviera, please keep your comment to Riviera and nothing but that. That's the time for that right now, just so you know. If it's not on Riviera, unfortunately, we will have to cut you off.
Okay, to begin with, the Brown Act requires.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You have violated the Brown Act. Good day. You have violated the Brown Act by not allowing me to speak on 8A.
Okay, and now I also want to read in, this issue came also with John Davis. He asked to speak on agenda item 7, public forum on legitimacy of the agency.
And he did speak.
He did speak on, he
Yes.
never requested any item under 8.
Okay.
Agenda item 8.
Yes, so he did speak in
So I
public
have no
forum.
record.
I do have him on my list. And he did speak in public forum. He was the third speaker.
Yes.
The second person on Zoom. So my apologies. Anyhow, but he asserted numerous times via the Q&A that he had asked to speak on all 8 items.
No.
So, okay,
Records of all the emails, only item 7.
Okay.
Public forum legitimacy GSA.
thank you. Ms. Vosberg, are you with us? Are you able to unmute yourself? I will give you a few more opportunities. I've already asked you to unmute. You have been promoted to a panelist. You're not able to unmute. I'm going to have to not promote you, bring you back to an attendee. Okay. Therefore, the next item on our agenda is informational item C, implementation of the salt and nutrient management plan for the Santa Monica Basin as identified in the GSP.
You'll promote Alex, will you?
Yes. Mr. Wade, are you able to hear us? You have been promoted and you're off mute.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Hello. Yes, you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, fantastic. Okay. Hello, GSA board members. My name is Alex Wade. I'm the supervising civil engineer for the City of Santa Monica's Water Resources Division. I'm here to speak on item 8C, the Salt Nutrient Management Plan. Let me please share my screen.
I actually have your slides, so if you, or okay.
Yeah, you can see the screen.
Yeah, I'll advance the slides as usual.
Okay, great. If you could please advance the next slide.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so presentation overview. So talking about the groundwater sustainability plan, management actions and projects and how they relate to the salt nutrient management plan, and going over the SNMP implementation, and finally a summary. Next slide, please. So the salt nutrient management plan is included in the State Water Board recycled water policy, and the intent of this plan is to address the potential for recycled water use to impact groundwater quality and promote basin-wide management of salts and nutrients in the groundwater. So this plan sets management strategies to maintain the water quality objectives set by the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board for the Santa Monica groundwater basin, and protects the beneficial uses of groundwater. So many other basins, including the adjacent West and Central Coast basins, already have approved SNMPs. So by developing a salt nutrient management plan, we would be in line with the majority of other basins in the area. So this salt nutrient management plan is in line with management action number 3, so supporting those water recycling projects for groundwater recharge, seawater intrusion barriers, and any other municipal, industrial, non-potable reuse applications in the subbasin, as well as ensuring the attainment of water quality objectives and protection of the subbasin. It also supports project number 2, the recharge of local groundwater aquifers. So this is with respect to the city's sustainable water infrastructure project that has approximately 1,100 acre feet per year of purified water available for that recharge. Next slide, please. So for the Olympic well field restoration, we already have one groundwater injection well, the SWIP injection well SM10I, that has capacity of about 250 to 300 acre feet per year. On the figure here, it's on the left-hand side in that red dot. And so this is just one injection well. And the city completed an anti-degradation study, which is one component of a salt nutrient management plan. Because the city did not have a salt nutrient management plan already completed, this anti-degradation study was required for the groundwater augmentation permit. And this was approved by the Regional Water Quality Control Board for this single well. However, as we're looking at additional recharge well opportunities, as well as non-potable reuse applications such as irrigation or any potential application where that recycled water could impact the groundwater aquifer, updates to the anti-degradation study will be required and reopened for every single application. So the implementation of a salt nutrient management plan would allow or cover any of the requirements of the anti-degradation study and allow for those additional applications of recycled water, not just for this Olympic well field application, but also for any users in the basin. So it limits that administrative and permitting time for all projects. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of the implementation for the salt and nutrient management plan. And so it would involve several different pieces. First off, though, the City of Santa Monica would lead the implementation of this SNMP and would require the development of a scope of work followed by the issuance of a request for proposals to solicit qualified firms to prepare this master plan. And it would also involve the coordination with GSA member agencies throughout the development of this plan. And so just to clarify, the plan includes topics such as point and non-point source analyses, load and waste load allocations, as well as the development of a monitoring plan. So coordination with the GSA member agencies will be necessary to help categorize and confirm applicable information. So this will include things like info requests, at least one or if not two workshops to gather input for the SNMP, and finally a review of the draft and final SNMPs. The city will also be coordinating with the Regional Water Quality Control Board for the review and final approval of this SNMP. So the scope of work and RFP is expected to be completed in January 2024, and we plan to return to the GSA board for the January board meeting to approve the issuance of the RFP. So next slide, please. But finally, a summary. This implementation of the salt nutrient management plan supports the sustainable management actions and projects in the GSP. City of Santa Monica would lead and cover all of the costs for developing this plan, and coordination with the GSC members will be required to develop this plan. So thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions.
Vice Chair.
Thank you. What I'm wondering is, again, as someone who's not a water quality person, anti-degradation study, what are we preventing from degrading? Is it the salt and nutrient levels in the groundwater?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
And the all the regions have their water quality objectives for basins. So Santa Monica has water quality objectives as well, and so this plan would be to support and protect those objectives.
Right, and with the SWIP, is there infrastructure for some point in the future when we have monitoring wells closer to the coast, perhaps having some of the SWIP water go to prevent saltwater intrusion? Is that one of the goals of the SWIP project?
Not currently. The current intent of the SWIP is to inject the groundwater into the Olympic subbasin. However, we are exploring lots of different alternatives for where we can inject that water from SWIP and to potentially prevent those types of items in the future if they do incur.
Okay, very well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions presented? Public comments?
We have no public comments on this item.
Okay. All right. So we'll move on to the next one.
Yeah,
I think
Chair.
Director Welsh had a proposal maybe for agenda management.
Yeah, I'd request with all the folks we have in the room for item C to be moved up and heard prior to
9C.
9C, moved up to be heard before A and B.
I believe we need a motion and vote on that.
Yeah,
for
so
that
you would
happen.
like to move it right after this agenda item?
Correct.
Okay.
So the proposal is to move item 9C to be heard now, and then we'll then continue after that 8D, 9A, and then 9B.
Correct.
And Chair, if I can ask, there be a short, maybe
5-minute
break.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. Well, we're doing now at 9C, right? We'll take a 5-minute break now, and then we'll move 9C up and then continue the rest of the item.
That's fine.
You want to make a motion?
Is 5 minutes enough? You
We have to make a motion.
No, I was just going to second the motion.
Motion to second.
Okay.
Is there
Okay, right.
discussion?
Back, so we're on with agenda management, we'll move into item 9C.
Yeah, so it's 11:57, we're bringing the meeting back to order. We're moving agenda item 9C up, Hillcrest Country Club well application. This item was continued from the July 19th, 2023 board meeting. Item I is presentation of the findings. II is presentation from Hillcrest. So Dr. Weinberger.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. My name, for the record, is Dr. Jill Weinberger. I'm with DUDEC. We are the consulting firm that is part of a team that prepared the groundwater sustainability plan for the Santa Monica subbasin, and we've been assisting the GSA with implementation of the GSP. If you could just forward to the next slide, thanks. There's a lot of words and a lot of background. I will try to get through it fairly quickly. Many of us in this room are aware that this item was on the agenda for the previous board meeting, and it's been continued. So this is just a refresher of why we're here on this item. It's the executive order N722 from the governor that required that well permitting agencies needed to refrain from issuing permits for new or replacement wells without written verification from a GSA that the extraction would not be inconsistent with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Program established in the GSP. Hillcrest Country Club, you'll see slides that will refer to just HCC for simplicity. Drilled 2 new wells starting in September of 2022. The GSA, the Santa Monica Basin GSA, SMB GSA, adopted rules and procedures in April of 2023 regarding new wells in the basin. Those 2 wells, HCC 5 and HCC 6, are not yet equipped, and that HCC has requested a letter from the GSA verifying that proposed production from these wells on the order of about 210 acre-feet per year is not inconsistent with the GSP to meet that executive order requirement. If you could go to the next slide, just where we are in the basin. This is a map showing the location of the Hillcrest Country Club. It's located in the eastern part of the subbasin. You'll see that blue line that cuts across the aerial photo is the eastern boundary of the subbasin. And the Hillcrest Country Club is the shaded green polygon on that map. And the 2 new well locations are shown as HCC 5 and HCC 6. Hillcrest Country Club is approximately 100 acres of irrigated acreage. Existing irrigation wells on the property have pumped about 215 acre-feet per year. Historically, that information was provided by Hillcrest in a report that they submitted to the GSA as part of their application for this letter. And the proposed production from HCC 5 and HCC 6, the new wells, would be about 210 acre-feet per year. That would meet all of their on-site irrigation demands between the existing and the new. So I mentioned that Hillcrest submitted a report, the hydrologic report submitted by the Country Club, and DUDEC initially reviewed that report just to make sure that it contained all the information that was required in the rules that were set up by the GSA in order to apply for this letter, and it did. There were a couple minor comments, just some discrepancy in distances cited to nearest disadvantaged communities or known groundwater contamination sites, nothing to suggest that the report needed to be rewritten or resubmitted. And then there was a back and forth over email, I believe, clarifying how Hillcrest would notify the GSA of well ownership transfers. And so moving forward, that would need to be formalized as part of the report if the board decides to move forward with this project. What is it that DUDEC did after we verified that the report contained all the required information? We took the information provided by the Country Club, by the applicant, and modeled potential groundwater impacts using the USGS Los Angeles Coastal Plain groundwater model, the LAC-PGM. And that is the same model that was used in the GSP. So that's the same model that was used to assess impacts in the future conditions in the groundwater sustainability plan that was used here. It's developed by the USGS. And in this particular comparison, we compared the 2030 baseline scenario from the GSP to pumping proposed by Hillcrest and a slightly higher pumping rate. So let me pause there to talk about the 3 scenarios that we looked at. That 2030 baseline scenario is a climate change scenario that we were required to analyze in the GSP. So that accounts for climate parameters provided by DWR in 2030, the assessment of what climate parameters would look like in 2030. And that was the baseline for what we anticipated would happen to groundwater levels, seawater intrusion, subsidence, all of the sustainability indicators that we had to analyze in the GSP. So this is a required scenario in the GSP at the 2030 climate scenario. Hillcrest, as I mentioned, so that's the first, the first column there that you would see. So climate conditions were the 2030 conditions. In that baseline model, which was done for the GSP, there was no pumping from these new wells. They weren't known yet, so they couldn't pump yet. And the total groundwater production under that scenario was 9,200 acre feet. The second column, this is the explicit modeling of what Hillcrest has said that they would use. So 210 acre feet per year from the two new wells. That pumping was divided between HCC 5 and HCC 6 based on the reported production anticipated from those wells in the report that was submitted by Hillcrest. So 126 acre feet per year was allocated to HCC 5, 84 acre feet per year was allocated to HCC 6, and you'll see that that increased the total groundwater production by approximately 210 acre feet per year. And then the third column is if those wells pumped constantly at their anticipated full production rate. This is not something Hillcrest anticipated doing. It is not what they said would happen in the report. This is just a second scenario that we ran at a slightly higher production rate. And you'll see that production rate is 340 acre feet per year. So if you move to the next slide, we used the model to look at what might happen to the sustainability indicators that are directly discussed in the GSP, as well as the other factors that need to be considered under the GSP. So if you remember back to all of the times I was talking about the GSP, there are these 6 sustainability indicators that we have to explicitly address and assign minimum thresholds and measurable objectives to if they're relevant to the basin. So those are changes in groundwater level, changes in groundwater in storage, degradation of water quality, land subsidence, interconnected surface water and groundwater, and seawater intrusion. Those are the 6 sustainability indicators. In this particular basin, we are focused on 4, and we go through the reasoning for that in the GSP. So we're looking at groundwater levels, groundwater in storage, seawater intrusion, and land subsidence resulting from groundwater withdrawals. Those are the 4 that we analyzed in this analysis based on the outcomes of the GSP. Additionally, we have to look at interbasin flows, so groundwater that's moving between basins in the subsurface. We have to look at potential mobilization of groundwater contaminant plumes from groundwater production. So if you start producing in a new area, you can change the gradient. You can start moving a plume towards your production zone. We have to look at potential impacts to underrepresented communities, and we have to look at impacts to groundwater-dependent ecosystems. Potential impacts to groundwater-dependent ecosystems. So these are the factors we reviewed. And I'm going to go through a couple of maps here, and I apologize because the color choices are poor to be able to see this. And I apologize, I'm going to stand up because I'm a former teacher, so I have to point. And you can't see it anyway. So these are the 2 wells, HCC 6 and HCC 5, shown in the eastern portion of the subbasin. There is a very faint orange line around these wells. That's a drawdown at this 210 acre foot per year scenario. Again, this is the scenario proposed by Hillcrest Country Club. And that's a drawdown of approximately 1 foot. So that's a water level decline of about 1 foot in the primary aquifer, the Silverado aquifer, layer 5 in the model. based on the proposed production from HCC 5 and HCC 6. So it extends just in this area. There is an additional yellow contour, which you really can't see, that comes out and around in layer 5, and that's between really a non-measurable in the model and so 0 and 1 foot. So there is drawdown of less than a foot in all of the area between the orange and the yellow under this pumping scenario. And then if you could go to the next slide, because I'm going to have to show these. Under the higher scenario, again, this is not what Hillcrest proposed. This is just if those wells ran 24 hours a day, 365 days a year at the maximum pumping rate. This red would be a drawdown of 5 feet. The orange would be 1 foot, and the yellow here would be between 0 and 1 feet. And so, and I should have pointed out, we have actual numbers in the bullets there. So at the higher pumping scenario, you would see declines on the order of 0.6 to 1.3 feet in that Silverado aquifer. So we can go to the next slide. And this one is comparing the flow across the western boundary of the subbasin between the different model scenarios. Now, western boundary flow could be seawater intrusion, right? So you can think of that if we start pulling water from the west in the subsurface, the west of us, we have Santa Monica Bay, saline water, we can start drawing that into our aquifers at some point. Not unexpectedly, if we increase the pumping in the basin, the model suggests that compared to the baseline flow, which is that gray lowermost line, sorry, I'm gonna have to get up again. So the baseline scenario, that baseline 2030 scenario, right, is this gray lowermost line. Compared to that, you would see an increase of on the order of 25 to 30 acre feet per year of flow across the western boundary by the end of the model scenario. So 5 to 6% of the simulated flow across that boundary. If we go to the next slide. We also needed to look at flow across the southern boundary of the basin because there's an interconnection between the Santa Monica Basin and the West Coast Basin to the south. And what we see here is the opposite. So we have flows in the gray that are declining over time, which is a concern to the West Coast Basin. So right now there's flow from the Santa Monica Basin into the West Coast Basin. That flow is projected even under the baseline scenario in the GSP to decline over time. It's expected under any higher pumping scenarios to decline a little bit further over time. So the model is doing what we would expect. You increase pumping and you would see a even less flow going to the West Coast Basin. That decrease is on the order of 65 to 70 acre feet per year, about 36 to 43% of the anticipated eventual flow under the baseline scenario. So if we go to the next slide, this is more or less a summary of what's in the report. So as far as groundwater elevations are concerned, we saw a decline on the order of 0.2 to 1.3 feet model. That has a low potential for impacts to the minimum thresholds and measurable objectives. So right now, water levels are 50 feet above the measurable objectives. An additional decline of 1 foot is not going to hit the measurable objective. So there's a low potential for impact to the water levels and water storage measurable objectives and minimum thresholds. So that's the first two big bullets there. When we look at land subsidence tied to groundwater withdrawal, again, a decline on the order of this magnitude is a low potential for impact to land subsidence from groundwater withdrawals. groundwater levels would remain within historical levels in the subbasin, so that wouldn't be expected to trigger additional land subsidence concerns at all. When we look at seawater intrusion, there is a potential, model suggests there is a potential for increased seawater intrusion as a result of increased pumping in the basin. If we go to the next slide, looking now not at the specific sustainability indicators, but these other factors that we have to assess. When we look at flow to the West Coast Basin, it is decreased compared to the GSP model scenarios, and so there is a potential for increased pumping to negatively impact that flow across the southern boundary. When we look at mobilization of contaminant plumes, this really isn't the right model to do that. That would have to be done on a local scale, and this is a regional scale model. So we would need to assess that differently. If you look at underrepresented communities and domestic well users, the water in these communities is provided by local water purveyors, whoever they are in the basin. We have multiple water purveyors in the basin. There are no known domestic groundwater production wells in the basin. We reviewed this as part of the GSP. So we don't see a potential for impact to domestic water users because we don't know of any in the basin. And then for groundwater dependent ecosystems, when we look at the drawdown anticipated from any additional pumping in the vicinity of the Hillcrest Country Club, that drawdown really doesn't extend in the shallower layers of the model to the areas of the groundwater dependent ecosystems that have been identified and discussed in the GSP. And so there's a low potential for impact from this additional pumping on any groundwater dependent ecosystems. So again, this is just a summary table. And I'll say for the mobilization of contaminant plumes there, so let me start with the table. We look, here are the list of factors that were considered in the report, some summary of what the changes would be and a potential impact assessment. And you'll see 3 of them have a potential impact listed with them: seawater intrusion, flow to the West Coast Basin, and mobilization of contaminant plumes. Now, the mobilization of contaminant plumes only remains as a potential impact because it hasn't been directly assessed in this report, right? You'd need a different model to do that. But like I said, as you would expect from the model, it's behaving in a way you would anticipate that there is the potential for increased pumping in the basin to increase seawater intrusion, flow across the West Coast, the western boundary, and decrease flow across the southern boundary. So simulated changes in the groundwater elevations and water budget terms are following the expected trends. The potential to increase seawater intrusion and decrease flow to the West Coast Basin is possible from this pumping, but I will caution that the magnitude of the model changes is likely within the uncertainty of the model. So it's an area where you could say that the model cannot predict with exact certainty how much water is going to come across any of these boundaries, what exactly the water level changes would be. And so these changes are trend assessments, right? Changes in where we think the flows might occur, but it's not with any certainty to say that this will change anything by exactly this amount, because it's within the uncertainty of the model. And so I think with that, I don't know if we go to questions from the board on this first, and then we would go to Hillcrest.
So I have a clarification, just the presentation mentioned Executive Order N722.
Yeah.
But it was actually, there's another order.
It's been superseded, yes.
Just want to make it clear on the record
Yeah.
that it just added an additional exemption for replacing existing currently permitted wells with new wells that will produce an equivalent quantity of water as the well being replaced, or the existing well is being replaced because it's been acquired by eminent domain or acquired well under the threat of condemnation. So I just want to mention that.
Thank you.
So any questions from the board on 9C running that?
On the presentation, just clarification is, are we taking into consideration, or maybe you can give me the difference between what's being pumped now and what's being proposed?
So I believe the existing pumping is on the order of 215 acre feet per year at Hillcrest from their existing wells, and they are proposing an additional 210 acre feet
So
per
it's
year.
an additional 210.
Yes,
So it's like
that's my understanding.
Your line for, this was helpful, but on that last bullet, can you help me understand what that means?
Yeah, I stumbled over that a little bit as I was summarizing it. A model of the groundwater basin is inherently has inherent uncertainty built into it, right? It is a model of a physical system. So we can assess the different factors that could contribute to the uncertainty in that model. And I don't have right now off the top of my head what our assessment said in the GSP of the uncertainty in that model. I can look it up. But I can tell you that it would have been greater than changes on the order of 50 acre feet per year inflows. So, so the uncertainty in the, and I'm not applying it to this case, in a totally separate hypothetical, if we saw an increase in flow across the western part of the basin of 1,000 acre feet per year, that would be outside the uncertainty of the model, and we could say that there is a real factor here in the model that suggests that you will be seeing seawater intrusion sooner than you might like. If we're within the uncertainty of the model, we can talk about trends, but we can't say for sure that it's going to be 50 acre feet per year.
So maybe I could, I'm sorry, Director Gonzalez, so let me, again, take it out of scientific realm and translate it into junior realm. Could this be comparable to the latest poll that came out that shows, where they say plus or minus 4% the poll is accurate, and so if one candidate or one referendum is 3% of the people say they would vote for it, or there's a difference of 3%. If there's uncertainty in the poll of 4% and there's only a 3% difference, it's a toss-up. You can't say whether the poll is accurate. But if the poll says that 93% of the people would approve it, then you'd say it's outside of the realm of uncertainty and probably would. Can you compare it that way?
I would be loath to compare it to a political poll. I will stay away from that.
But really dumbing it down to my level.
However, I will say that I would not, I would say the trends in the model can make determinations on potentials, but I could not say to you that we will see 50 additional acre feet a year of seawater intrusion.
Okay. I don't know if that helped.
Ironically, I just got a text saying our building is going to do an earthquake drill.
Oh, yeah, 1019.
So my analogy to kind of continue on that point is that, is this similar to saying the difference between a magnitude 1.0 earthquake and the impacts associated with a magnitude 7.0? And where I'm going to kind of go back to this table is, are you saying the uncertainty pertains to the impacts in the model's ability to predict column number 2 with a level of accuracy? Is it 0.2 to 0.7 feet? Or are you suggesting that the magnitude of the pumping being 210 is, to use your analysis findings, no potential for impact. Meaning the pumping does not trigger a significant impact to garner a different description.
The magnitude of the pumping at 210 acre-feet per year or 340 acre-feet per year does not produce changes in the model interbasin flows that are greater than the model uncertainty.
Would that change if the pumping were hypothetically, say, 2,000 acre feet?
So at the last board meeting, I gave a presentation with an extreme scenario of additional pumping throughout the basin, and the changes in flow that we were describing in that presentation were outside the level of error in the model. So yes, you would see with increased pumping a greater certainty in the potential for impacts.
The trends. So you're saying we're within the uncertainty of the model, and it follows the trends that we would expect.
Right. It follows the trends that you would expect. So I mean, the model is behaving in a way you would expect it to. I would be surprised if we increased the pumping and saw a decrease in flow from the ocean or an increase in flow from the West Coast Basin, right? So, or an increase in flow to the West Coast Basin.
So at the end of the day, it's following the trend that
it's following a trend that we would expect.
Is it correct to simply ask that depending on the pumping rate, the trend, the slope of the trend may change, right? The trend is still going one direction, but
Yeah, I haven't assessed. I mean, the reason you have a groundwater model is generally that these are not linear relationships, and so I haven't done that specific assessment.
And just to clarify, I'm assuming the planned pumping, I'm not.
Correct. Correct. Yes.
The question I had regarding uncertainty to follow Director Gonzalez's question, that if we had a higher number of pumping, you might have better certainty. Could another way to eliminate that uncertainty providing additional monitoring to eliminate those gaps that we have in our model to eliminate that uncertainty? So with additional monitoring to calibrate the model help to reduce that uncertainty.
Yeah, so I think there are two different things here. One is, yes, additional data for the model will help refine the model and would reduce the uncertainty in the model. At the same time, additional monitoring gives you greater certainty because it's actual measured conditions in the groundwater basin as to what the impacts actually are.
So the monitoring will give you the actual results, so essentially you may not have to predict with the model anymore. Is that
right? The model can be used to try to assess future conditions. Actual monitoring can tell you what's truly happening in the aquifers.
Thank you.
I have a question. So hypothetically, if Hillcrest were to start pumping, but then also proceed with a stormwater capture project to eventually take the pumps offline, is there a linear relationship with the impact assessments where, you know, we can expect for groundwater elevation, you know, 0.6 to 1.3? Would that be mostly in the beginning, or is it sort of across time, sort of equally going down, or is there a worst? Initially, are the impacts worse?
So no, and we would not anticipate that initially the impacts would be worse. In fact, initially they would not equalize across the basin, a broader range of the basin. They would be more localized, what we would anticipate. And so if that pumping, I think what I'm hearing is if that pumping were to occur for a period of time and then be reduced, could we recover from groundwater elevation declines and other things? We haven't specifically modeled that, but I would anticipate that would occur over time and could recover.
Any other questions?
One more. Earlier, you spoke about the model itself and how it was being calibrated to account for some amount of pumping. Just for my own understanding, was that calibration folded into the current analysis of Hillcrest, or would this be an additive to what you've already done or calibrated?
I'm gonna tread a little bit lightly here. The model that was constructed by the USGS was fully calibrated, and there's a model report documenting how they calibrated the model, what the inputs were, what the outputs were. When you take that model and you use it to predict future conditions, it retains that initial calibration, but we have not recalibrated it for this analysis because it's a future assessment.
And maybe to add to that, Chair Lang's comment about analysis, whether it's wells or additional calibration to the model, can you help us understand what would be needed to properly analyze the basin and maybe what that would cost?
Let me start by saying I think the basin has been properly analyzed under the GSP. I believe that over the next few years, as we collect additional data, we will want to include those data in the next evaluation of the basin, and that would be, those data would be folded into the model. We have some anticipated costs that are in our existing contract that takes us through the 5-year evaluation plan. I don't remember specifics for the modeling off the top of my head today.
I mean, if I may ask that, my understanding of the GSP and the model is done is based on best available data that we have currently to calibrate the model and to predict, right? There's obviously data gaps, and our GSP acknowledges that, right? There are sustainability indicators. You know, there's data caps, there may be data not available to fully evaluate areas such as these, right? When they're the lower amount of pumping compared to a higher amount of pumping, right? And so we have the data caps and little data to fully evaluate the related undesired impacts, right, in the GSP. And this is to be further refined and developed as part of the implementation of the GSP with additional monitoring going forward. So we understand, you know, the model as it stands, that's the best we have, best available information. It's on us and pumpers, right? If we want to pump this water, we got to maintain it. So we need to move forward and monitor, right? That's part of the sustainability objectives of the GSP to move forward. Is that correct? My understanding of that? I believe that's spelled out in our GSP.
That is my understanding, yes.
Public comments on?
No, so we have one more
Or does it
presentation
go to
and
next
then
presentation?
we'll go to public comment. We're not live.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, the next presentation.
All right, we just start with a cover page first. I'll just do a quick
Is
introduction.
there, that's not there, there's no presentation? Or
So there is a presentation, we have to draw it, yes. Pull it up here.
It's not in our packet though, right?
Correct.
Okay.
We had to do it. You should though have in your packet previous proposals, the communication that we had and what we were proposing. So
You mean the letter that was emailed to all the board on
yes,
September 21st?
correct.
Got the letter. Okay.
And there was also an earlier one of geosyntech we had put in the record that was just the initial part of the
That's the
assessment. as well.
attachment to
It was attached. Yeah.
Just to confirm that's dated August 1st, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I want to make sure we have all that.
Thank you. So quickly again, my name is Joshua Greer. I'm a board member of Hillcrest. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a member of the city, or I'm a resident of the city of Bedford Hills. I want to start by thanking the chair and particularly Director Welsh for the bio right there. I was lucky enough to work with Director Welsh for 6 years as a public works commissioner. And really this whole project is really Beverly Hills' fault because I got really enamored as a public works commissioner with water and all the issues that we had with water. And when I became a member of Hillcrest and I started having conversations with them, everything that was coming to my mind, what we were seeing in the trends was, guys, we got to prepare for the future. And we started preparing it at great expense. We completely changed out all of our grass to more drought-resistant grass. We put purple pipe in to the corner of where we hope eventually Roxbury Park will have some sort of recycling plant there that we could do. But really, we needed to build a water enterprise. And so about 4 years ago, I started campaigning to Hillcrest to say, listen, we need to look at this holistically. We need to look at how we're managing our wells. We need to look at the quality of our water. We need to look at the impact. And really exciting, which was great to see with the grid project, is we have a potential opportunity as well down the road for significant ground recharge because of the geography that we have. So that was the pitch I gave to Hillcrest. They reluctantly started forwarding me money, and we started going into this process of building some wells. So I'm now going to go to the page that all our lawyers wrote. And by the way, just to quickly know who this posse is. This is relative, we've got wonderful people from Geosyntec who have been our consultants and sort of the brains behind how we're handling the water project. We have our lawyers here as well, just doing what lawyers do best. We've got Matt Mulbrook, who is our chief agronomist, in case there are any questions. And I'm going to keep this pretty short, but they're available for other questions if you have them. So if we can go to the first page. What we're requesting is that you verify that we are not inconsistent with the GSP's plan. This has been a challenge for us because at the time that we applied for the permit, there was no established plan. And as of today, it still hasn't been established. From our lawyer standpoint, they feel like there's no inconsistency can exist. Therefore, you guys really need to verify this. This is not within the purview. Now, having said that, let's go to the next slide really quickly. We're not here to try to bully. We really actually are here because we care about being water stewards of the city. And so again, we brought in Geosyntec, we did our own hydrologic report, and we believe, and I didn't quite get the exact answer I was hoping to get, but it would seem, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, that we are consistent, at least with the proposed model that has come forth. Is that a reasonable thing to say?
I don't think you're asking questions right now.
Okay, so we are assuming based on the data that we provided and the data that DUDEC did that we believe we are consistent within the model, within the thresholds. And again, we feel that we are within our rights to get the verification, but I want to go back to the first point again, which is that we want to be good water stewards. And even though we don't have the mandate yet, and I'm sure you will eventually get it, we want to start now, and we want to start doing this now. And so if we go to the next page, this is more just a follow-up. You asked about seawater intrusion, very important questions. We talked about ways of monitoring, and we tried to work over the last couple of months to really figure that out. My lawyers want to say again, it's irrelevant to the verification process of what we're doing right now. But again, we want to be good stewards. We want to participate and be partners with you. And so we're back here today. We couldn't get as far as we want. The last the last thing that we put in on the 21st, we never got a response from you guys in terms of what you want. And what I would say is we are prepared right now to start, well, it'll take us a few months to ramp up, but we're prepared to start monitoring on site almost immediately. I think that's a very reasonable thing to do. I think we can do it with our existing wells. And it's something that I think makes a lot of sense in terms of improving your data. There was some discussion about external wells at various test wells at different locations. Again, I think we support that 1000%. However, we're not the specialist or the body that should do that. And so our proposal was to essentially help contribute to those test wells, provide some sort of financial assistance to that, allow you guys to figure out where you want to put them and really leave the management to you. We'll provide our data, we'll work with you directly. And again, our goal, if you look at our plan, it really is a virtuous circle. By going completely off of imported water and then cleaning the water, we'll actually end up using less water over time because we'll end up having to use less chemicals, less inputs to improve it. So for us, this is the best long-term way that we can preserve imported water. It allows us, as we say, to be completely off imported water for all of our agriculture, which is a pretty big deal. And we've been waiting now for several months, and we have wells in the ground. We would really like to finish them. And I do believe the spirit of what we're trying to do here is consistent with what you guys want to do. I think despite the actual mandate, we want to voluntarily provide this data right now. And we hope you will consider this and we can come to a conclusion pretty quickly. Did I miss anything? That's really, I want to keep it short. I know you guys have a long day.
Discussion and.
Yeah, the next,
Sorry, we could go into more detail about the monitoring discussed in this, but I know there's might just be, on-site or off-site contributions, but might just be best to have the questions to have that to facilitate that discussion.
Okay, well, we'll start with.
No, I don't have a question. Just through the chair, I'd like to ask that when people speak, when you first start, if you could just state your name for the record. Thank you.
And I will also just request that everybody use their outdoor voices and project, please, because we have folks on Zoom.
understood. So just to summarize, we're requesting a verification that we are consistent with the proposed plan. And we would like to also move forward with you on an ongoing basis to discuss how we can do monitoring and how we can provide financial contributions to help accelerate the monitoring around the basin. Thank you.
Start with questions. Major Gonzalez, Welch, Dr. Singletary. Questions? Vice Chair.
No.
I guess we'll leave all the questions to Beta. All right. So questions. I think if you could go back one slide, it was probably easier if we had those as talking points. One of the statement that was made was that the verification process is not necessary because the GSP hasn't been approved. Is that what I heard? Is that what the statement you guys have made?
Yeah, let me clarify. This is Jason Haas, counsel. We weren't saying that the GSP has not been established. What we're stating more specifically was there weren't management programs that's adopted in the GSP that this proposed.
Are you referring to like management actions and projects in the GSP wasn't adopted? Well, I'm trying to clarify what you guys are getting at.
So this is Chris Wessel with Geosyntec Consultants, consultant for Hillcrest. Can we go back 2 more slides, Amy? Sorry, I think the executive order, and I realize it's been updated, but this language hasn't changed, is that any new pumping is not inconsistent with any sustainable management program established in the GSP. Okay. There's not a question about the GSP itself not being established. It's that the GSP has potential programs. The GSP doesn't actually have such a program established in and of itself. And what we would like to show is we are still even looking at those potential programs and how even our pumping would not be an issue with those, and that we could still pump as Dudek and Ms. Weinberger showed, Dr. Weinberger showed, and it wouldn't actually be at this point in time an impact to those programs, but those actually aren't established programs in the GSP.
Just from my understanding, can you clarify what a program is, maybe, an example?
Yeah, there's a number of potential programs in the GSP. So for example, one of them would be like cutting back on, and it could ask.
That's a management action in the GSP.
Yeah, so like potentially reducing pumping across the basin.
So I'm confused, but that management action is in the GSP.
That program would be established if certain metrics and thresholds were exceeded or met, depending on how you want to say that. Dr. Weinberger, is that?
I'm gonna ask our GSA consultant. My understanding is that there's management actions. We have undesirable indicators established in the GSP. So if we see any of those trending in the wrong direction, we will start implementing those management actions. We're in the process of implementing some of those management actions and projects already, right?
I would say that's for the board to decide, but yes, there are projects and management actions established in the GSP, and that under Sigma, the GSP is, the GSA has the, I should tread lightly here.
Right.
My understanding of Sigma is that the GSA is allowed to implement the GSP until it hears, once it's been adopted, until it hears otherwise from DWR.
Right, so we can move forward with management actions and projects as the board decides here as part of the program to sustainably manage the groundwater basin. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you. So if we go back to the last slide, there's a couple of items I would like to clarify in terms of correspondence. Maybe you guys can help me understand it, because in reading through the proposal that was sent to all the board members on September 21st, there was a statement, I think, let's see where are my notes on this. There was a proposal made, I guess, and you're waiting to hear back from GSA consultant. But in reading the correspondence, you know, Geosyntek's initial correspondence to DUDEC and the Secretary of GSA was, in my opinion, simply confirming the meeting minutes of the meeting that took place on July 19th. In reading that memorandum, there was no proposal or no ask of the GSA consultant. It was just confirming the understanding.
We were looking for clarification, which we did not receive.
Clarification, it doesn't spell out what clarification is being sought though. I'm just, when I read this, I just see meeting minutes and there's no ask of question of what is to be confirmed. So potentially there's a miscommunication on your understanding of what your proposal and waiting for clarification. To me, I read meeting minutes. And that's the document you guys have sent to the board that I'm holding up right now.
You're referring to the attachment from August 1st?
Correct.
Chair Wayne? So
we want to read it. I mean, you guys have a copy, you can read it, right? It just says, today this uncertainty has made the GSA reluctant to allow new pumping, therefore adding these wells would be a gesture of goodwill by Hillcrest to facilitate a more robust monitoring system. There is no proposal of what the monitoring is.
Yeah. No, the proposal would be in the.
Yeah, but in your letter dated September 21st, you're claiming that the GSA consultant and staff, well, sorry, not staff, the GSA secretary did not respond, but they had nothing to respond to. There was no questions posed in your memo dated August 1st. So I'm a little confused here.
The August 1st was a summary of the memo of going back and forth. There was a dialogue that was happening back and forth.
Right, so these are meeting minutes.
Yeah.
Memorandum. I don't see a question in here,
So some of the statements in our last, in the last board meeting, three months ago, July 18th, 19th, forgive me for the exact date, was concerns about seawater intrusion, concerns about interbasin flow, right? And so it was very broad. We need to know more about this. We wanted to make sure we understood very correctly what was meant by monitoring for seawater intrusion. Are you asking Hillcrest to put in a well? Certainly it doesn't make any sense to put in a well for seawater intrusion on Hillcrest site. In fact, the GSP very clearly says Santa Monica would be doing this. We know that's not done yet. Frankly, and again, to Josh's point, we're in agreement with that and happy to, help financially with that because seawater intrusion makes sense to happen on the west.
Trying to save some time, but you're not answering the question, right? There was no ask in this memo and correspondence.
We did ask for future, for clarification. It was extremely vague and Chris.
Where was that is what I'm asking, because you're claiming that the GSA consultant didn't respond when
my ask was probably in the body of the email, which is not copied in front of you.
I mean, I would ask the GSA consultant or secretary to chime in what was the correspondence as a follow-up when they transmitted.
So I'm going to read the email. Hi, Lizette, Jill, and Amy. Thank you again for the helpful meeting last week. I've attempted to summarize the main takeaways from our meeting in the attached. Please advise if you have any edits or comments. As an update on our end, Tara and I are working on detailing out some different scenarios that would meet the direction provided in our discussion, summarized in the attached. We'll be discussing these with Hillcrest in approximately 2 weeks. After that, it would seem like a good time to meet again. We'll follow up to get that meeting scheduled soon. Thanks, Chris.
So I guess I asked our secretary Dudek, was there a follow-up meeting scheduled following that correspondence?
Has there been, heard back again.
Has there been any other correspondence from Geosyntek or Hillcrest on that matter? No. So then let's fast forward to this letter that we have received, right, with claims that the GSA did not respond. I find that to be false because you just provided meeting minutes and subsequent meetings that were supposed to be held to discuss the situation.
Josh Greer here. The goal is not to be accusatory. The goal is to say we don't have clarification. And I would say from that email, perhaps it wasn't worded the way, but what I understood that to be is that we were asking, are we on the right track? We didn't get a response to that. Was there any other responses beyond that?
There was no follow-up from your side to reach out to set up a follow-up meeting.
It was our understanding, Lisa Gold, that from the meeting with Jill, Chris, Tara, Lisa, all of us, is that we had 2-3 more meetings that had to be set up. We had not even jumped on what indicators would cause a well to be shut down or what So we understood in our conversation that we had a lot more to discuss. This was just the first. So when I saw we'll follow up to get that meeting scheduled soon, that was 100% my understanding from our meeting.
So I'm just setting the record straight, right? Because you had put this on the slides, right? The GSA staff failed to respond to Temslor's proposal. There was no proposals being made. There was no clarifying questions being asked other than confirming the meeting minutes.
I don't think that was the spirit of what we were trying to say, and Chris, I wasn't on the call, Chris was. Again, from our standpoint, we've been very.
I understand your standpoint, but I'm just clarifying for the record because the letter that we have received sounded like the GSA had failed to respond and work with you guys, when that is indeed not the case. So I'm just gonna state that for the record and we'll move on.
Okay.
Right, because I mean, it's written in here.
Just Rob Welch, City of Beverly Hills. I'm not privy to the letter you're referring to.
I think they emailed it to us.
I have copies.
They emailed it to all the board.
So it was not included in the packet?
No, it's not included in the packet.
We requested it be in the report.
It was
Yeah.
directly emailed to all of us.
It's on the GSA website, and I can send it to you right now. It was emailed to you, let me, by,
But was not included in the packet?
it's not in the packet.
It was a direct email to all the board.
I do not recall seeing the email.
I'm gonna
So
send
I'm, this conversation, I'm not privy to the back end of the
Right,
discussion.
and I think because it was sent to all the board members here, we could not respond to you guys either, and that would be in violation of Brown Act. If I had
Thursday,
replied all.
September 21st. You
Right,
received
so-
a copy. I'll go
I
through
guess
it.
I'll ask the other directors if you guys see that letter, I guess what I'm referring to, Vice Chair.
I saw the letter, I didn't, not the email that was sent, just right.
I'm gonna send it.
Right, I wasn't privy to that email as well, so that was more my question asking staff, what was the correspondence that was read?
I did receive the letter and that email.
In the spirit of what Josh mentioned, trying to advance the conversation to the issue at hand, a couple of things come to mind. So earlier this morning, we talked about adjustments to the minutes that we had in our board meeting July 19th to add for a monitoring solution to be established in light of our discussion last board meeting. And then the subsequent Hillcrest letter to us proposes a monitoring solution. So I'm wondering what issues or what information do we need to discuss that's germane to the ask of Hillcrest of us, is whether or not their permit is inconsistent. And I know we talked about this in the last board meeting, so I'm not trying to rehash that same conversation, but it seems like we have enough information for there to be a vote on the issue. In light of all that's been done, again, technical analysis from both sides. There's an update today. There was a conversation that the board members were not privy to subsequent to the board meeting on July 26th.
Right, I agree with that, there's a proposal on the table, all I was trying to do is correct for the record, because this is presented, accusing the GSA of being non-responsive, to make sure it's clear on the record that, we were there waiting to work with them, to clarify that, because that was the reason why we also continued, so the GSA consultant and Hillcrest could figure out a proposal. In this case, I think a proposal was just made, right? So that's what we have at hand. So that, with regards to the proposal, I have questions on that itself. You're proposing to use groundwater production wells as monitoring wells. I guess the question is probably for a consultant, is that typical industry best practice?
I don't want to speak for the widely as typical best practice. You could install additional monitoring wells, but we feel that we can get the group the data you all need to verify what we've modeled and to show impacts at large in the basin using the existing wells.
My understanding,
by shutting them down
for 8 hours, right? You would take.
Yeah, and again, Hillcrest has, they have 3 existing wells. We've shared the data we have on those. There's 2 additional wells obviously in question here. So 5 wells total. They're not all run at the same time, they're, you know, they go off and on, and so there's no question that we can utilize those wells to get the data we need.
So if we were to utilize those wells, it's unclear, at least to me, what that approach is, you know, for example, how frequent that you can relax for 8 hours? What are you sampling for? How do you even come up with 8 hours? That's the first point, right? That's a good number. Should it be 24? Should it be 48? I don't know. Right, so how did you come up with 8 hours, and what are you proposing as a frequency to relax these wells? Right, those that's not in your proposal. It just says we're gonna relax it for 8 hours. Is that once a year?
I can't we talked about doing them quarterly. I can't remember. I thought that was in the proposal, but perhaps it's not.
No, it's not in here, unfortunately.
Or is it on the slide?
So, you know, what was proposed in this correspondence does not have that information, other than.
There seems to be a bit of a broken telephone, certainly from our standpoint. We were under the impression we're waiting for feedback. Again, I don't want to negotiate with ourselves. What we're saying in the spirit is we want to use our wells to monitor, provide that data. We'll figure out the best practice to do that. We don't know the answer yet. Clearly, none of us do at the moment. But considering we are still within a margin of error, we think in good faith, we can go forward and develop a plan with you while we prepare this well for production.
So I'm gonna pause that for.
Sorry, can I clarify?
Sure.
The very first sentence in that bullet on the bottom of page 2 says 3 existing and 2 new on-site wells will be monitored for static groundwater elevation, quarterly basis, reported to GSA 2 times per year.
So every quarter you're gonna relax 5 wells altogether, 8 hours?
No, it
Each
would-
one at a
it would
time? So it's those details too, right? Like for each well, when
Sure,
are you doing that?
sure.
I'm not a geologist.
No, and
That made it easy for us to figure this out, right?
Yeah. And there's similar things here on the groundwater quality as well.
I just thought the proposal would be more comprehensive.
Well, I agree, and go ahead.
Let me step in just 1 second. The point of the letter, and what's referred to as the proposal letter, was not a defined, here's a proposal, you can sign it. The idea of the letter was, after looking at this idea of monitoring wells and evaluating them, and considering, you know, is it even Hillcrest's proper position or duty or responsibility or expertise to be building monitoring wells for seawater intrusion someplace else in the.
Well, I'm not talking about
No, no,
seawater
let me
intrusion.
finish. But so the point of the letter was to say, let's move away from that approach of us talking about drilling specific wells. It was, let's talk about this approach with the details to be fleshed out. So, you know, in terms of both the on-site monitoring, the amount and the contribution, this was an attempt to kind of redirect the conversation.
Okay.
And that's what we were looking for with feedback was, hey, what about this approach? And that was what we're hoping to get some feedback prior to today.
So the feedback you're asking the board for today, because there was no more correspondence with our GSA consultant on this matter. Is that correct?
We were on standby.
So I'm gonna ask our GSA consultant for their opinion on the use of groundwater production wells as monitoring wells. Is that standard practice, or is there something different should be considered?
Under Sigma, DWR does request that all new wells as part of the monitoring network for water levels be dedicated monitoring wells, not production wells.
And just doing a little bit of my own research, I just add to that, you know, if you look at DWR Bulletin 74-90, groundwater monitoring wells, at least for me, who's not a geologist or hydrogeologist, I didn't see production well listed as a type of monitoring wells. Right, they had individual monitoring wells dedicated, listed monitoring wells, and clustered monitoring wells. The only reference that I could find to using production wells or extraction wells for the purpose of monitoring, and I quote, "Some monitoring wells are designed to be multi-purpose. Monitoring wells can sometimes be used as extraction or injection wells for mitigation of pollution or contamination," which I don't think is the case here. Right, you guys are not mitigating pollution or
It
contamination.
wasn't one of the requests, and this was part of the confusion. And again, I don't know where the breakdown happened was. There's discussions about a particular gas station to the east of us and how those plumes would potentially, and doing the research, yeah, we could test for that, although we don't think it's actually relevant. Again, we're trying to understand based on not a very clear.
I'm just reading what I could find on technical details of what monitoring wells and best standard is. I'm not a technical expert in this area. I'm a treatment process expert, right? So your technical consultant, I hopefully could have advised on that.
And again, I think we looked at that as a possibility for the constituents you would like to observe. we believe we can, or the data that you would like to receive, we believe we can do that with the existing wells by resting them for a period of time. Could be longer than 8 hours. I think that it has to be developed out, but that's not something we can, this.
I think you're missing my point, is that the use of production wells is not standard practice for monitoring purposes.
But it also doesn't mean that we can't get reliable data from those wells. In going above and beyond what the question before the GSA is, are we not inconsistent with established programs in the GSP? And we are saying we are willing to monitor and get this group more data that we've said here doesn't currently exist. We understand that, understand how models work, and that this data is helpful, and we want to be good stewards. All of that. So it's still not the question in front of the group.
So it's your opinion that the use of groundwater production wells is a standard practice for monitoring purposes?
It is my opinion that we can get reliable, good data of groundwater levels that can be useful in terms of looking at the model and assessing hillcrest impacts in terms of, or effects of their pumping, in terms of groundwater drawdown, which is a measurable, a measurable objective in the GSP.
So it's a standard practice to get good data and reliable data. You're not going to answer that. That's okay.
But I also do want to point to a quote in the GSP. At this time, projects and management actions are not necessary to achieve sustainability in the subbasin, which has been managed sustainably over the last 30 years. However, projects and management actions may become necessary to respond to changing conditions of the subbasin in the future.
Yeah, to me, increased pumping is a changing condition.
But those management actions then may become necessary to respond to ours. The question before us is, are our wells, our Hillcrest proposed wells, inconsistent with established programs at this time? That's what the executive order requests and gives authority for the GSA to verify.
All right, I'm going to stop the back and forth on questions, I guess. That's the questions I have for you guys. And if there's no other questions, we'll do it. I don't know if there's public comment.
Yeah, we do have public comments, but
so we'll do that before discussion.
You can continue to discuss. I think it would be helpful to discuss and deliberate. It's really the pleasure of the board. But there are, I don't know, Mr. Foss, you're not going to have a public comment. You're just available to speak, correct?
How many public comments do you have?
4.
You guys want to hear the public comments first? Okay. Yeah, we'll hear the public comments first.
Okay.
I think it's all us.
Okay, so all of the public comments are here in person. So the commenters are Neil Brower, followed by Tara Wolf.
We're just here to answer questions.
Oh, you're just here to answer questions as well?
Yeah.
Okay, and Josh, you're here. So Chris, you're here as well. So that's.
Again, I think we're pretty clear in terms of what we're trying to do. We're trying to get off of imported water, as we think is a mandate for the state. We're trying to go above and beyond what any other golf course is currently doing in terms of our irrigation practices, in terms of what we want to build for our water management system. And we believe we will be a great example for other similar types of venues. We would request, and again, we believe based on the information that we have, that we are within the, however you want to verify the language. And again, we look forward to working with you in the future as you develop more plans to provide data and to be additional good stewards going forward.
Thank you for that public comment. So then we'll move to discussion amongst the board.
Would anyone like to take a break?
Okay. Why? Okay. So 5 minutes, 10-minute break?
10 minutes maybe?
Go crazy, take 10 minutes.
Oh, man, it's one. Should have brought it.
Do you want to take 10 minutes?
I think I offered that last time.
Okay, so we will return at 1:12. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. It's 1:13, and we will resume item 9C.
I'm coming.
Yes.
As
Council to
You
Santa
can't get
Monica,
out.
I
All
just
right.
want to put on the record that I know Hillcrest has had their attorneys make some statements into the record. And for the record, I just want to say that our not responding to them is not any indication of whether we agree or don't agree. It's just that we do not believe this is the forum for that kind of discussion.
This week, before we go into discussion, there's a couple of items. I know we focused on your guys' monitoring wells and your pumping well field. You had mentioned, you wanted to partner with the GSC. I'm just curious if you guys could elaborate more on that, on the other areas, the
Well,
seawater intrusion in the basin.
Again, it's a little unclear to us, and as we go back through the data, we're not the experts. You guys obviously need to develop a plan. So our assumption was that as you develop that we would provide some sort of monetary assistance to the development of this.
Are you able to, can you elaborate on that a little more, please? The monetary, like what has been discussed with you guys?
Again, I just want to point back, we look for preparing for the GSA representatives about this. Again, I think what we wanted to sit down and we're thinking in the meetings where we left it, and I apologize if there's a miscommunication, I think we really did feel that we were waiting a response, was that, okay, we know you want wells, maybe it sounds like we contribute towards some portion towards 3 monitoring wells. It's really your decision where you want to put them. You guys monitor it, but then we would pay some portion of that to be able. And so I mean, I don't know if that's a discussion you want to have in an open forum here, but we would figure paying some portion of the 3 wells to help cover the cost of that.
When you say 3, is that the
3 test monitoring wells?
Is that around your well field or which 3?
That's at your discretion.
That was, the 3 wells were discussed in that initial meeting.
We had 3 around the golf course, one by to the west,
So
by the
your
ocean,
guys'
and one to the
reference,
south.
the 3 wells, are they referencing the 3 around the well field?
No, we're referencing an earlier conversation when after the meeting, there was discussion about test wells. We talked about seawater intrusion. We talked about plume fields. There was a dialogue that started, and where it kind of ended was, all right, what exactly, again, we're not the experts. We'll provide whatever.
Right, I'm just trying to clarify which
with
3.
Yeah.
And so let me just to summarize that, give me 1 minute. On your August 1st memo from Geosyntec, it talks about the understanding, right, these are meeting minutes, the 3 wells around the Hillcrest property, 1 well in the southwestern portion of the basin for seawater intrusion, and then 1 well in the southern boundary of the basin with interbasin flow with the west coast basin, I believe, to try to address those potential impacts that DUDEC had in their presentation. So that's 5 wells for me that I counted. So I'm wondering which 3 wells are you guys referring to?
I think Josh is actually referring to the 2 latter wells, the offsite, what we call the offsite wells, one for seawater intrusion, one in the southern portion. So I think he means the 2.
Sorry.
Potentially, if there was a third for plume stuff offsite or something, that could be discussed. But I think those are the 2 that he's specifically referring to.
Yeah.
And then the assumption that Hillcrest would do some on-site on their own property.
Can I ask you guys why you don't think the on-site monitoring, having dedicated monitoring wells for the on-site well is important?
It's more a practical issue of just space and trying to figure out. I mean, we could, again, there's one other location we could have, but because our space is limited in terms of where we could actually physically put a well, we would kind of like to be able to come up with a practice to use an active well because we just don't have the extra resources if we're going to build the rest of this system right now. So I've been authorized to provide certain monetary compensation. Again, we don't know what's going to be best for your program, so we kind of leave it up to you guys to decide. We just need to figure out, I'll just go back to the thing. We look forward to hearing from the GSA. We don't really know clearly what we want. We think it's ultimately your decision. We think it's going to take you some time to figure out. And so again, if you wanted us to, I mean, I hate to sound crass, write a check today, we'd write a check, but I think the spirit again is like, nobody really knows yet what they need. And again, if we determine in the next year or 2 that we need to have seawater intrusion monitoring on Hillcrest, well, okay, we would certainly take that very seriously, but we don't actually know clearly what we need to do yet. And again, consistent with what it has, I just want to go back again to the main point while we're here. Our effect on these, at least from what I understand, is within the rounding error of some of the stuff that you're talking about. This is a very small, I mean, are you going to go through this with every private pumper in the?
Yes.
Okay.
Because when you're increasing and doubling your pumping, it's a concern, right? So I'll just voice my concern, the rest of the board can chime in, is today is one golf course. There's 6 private golf courses in our basin. We've seen the presentation the last meeting. What happens if everybody doubles their pumping? At what point does which golf course put us over the edge? And are they gonna complain, well, why did you let Hillcrest go first? Just because they go first, they get rights? I can't pump my water anymore? What do we do as a board when that time comes?
Can I respond to that?
No, that's a statement, sorry.
Can I also bring to
There's
the
a question.
record, the WRD letter, we are also put on notice that the basin to the south of us has filed a formal letter with Department of Water Resources. They serve water to 4 million people. So April 20th, 2022, this went to DWR saying, heads up, we don't, you can read this letter, it's in the packet. I invited them to speak today to this letter that they put on, and the email can go into the official record, which is we're watching and we're very concerned, and DWR knows that we are very concerned. So with that said, this is an important other piece of information, which is we're waiting for DWR to make a formal finding on it flows to the south to another basin that's also under SIGMA.
I guess my question earlier was more for the board, sorry, not for, really for you on geosyntax. So thank you for sharing that information. I guess the question I have is, there's, to me, this is just my thoughts. The immediate impact that we don't have data on is the double pumping of your well field. So the 5 that was discussed, documented in the meeting minutes, to me, it almost seems like the 3 around your well field is more critical than the other 2. As you're right, it's in our GSP, right? It's managed action GSA was going to take on, but because of the decreased double pumping, right, that you're proposing, and the uncertainty we have in the model, we're trying to eliminate that model to find consistency, to eliminate that uncertainty so we have actual data, as Dudek has explained, that eliminates that uncertainty. That's what we were trying to do to protect and sustainably manage the basin. So I understand the last 2 is the GSA responsibility, but to double your pumping and not accurately monitor it using industry standard practices, to me, I find that troubling.
Can we respond to that?
I would ask the board, I guess, if they have any comments on that.
I'd like to hear a response.
Okay, let's hear your response.
I want to clarify a couple things. One, we do not think it's unimportant or not important to monitor on our site. So he said that a little bit back, Chair Wayne. So this group does agree it's important to monitor on our site. There is a question about whether we've already invested a lot of money in this. Can we get the data that would help the basin by using lower cost methods? That's the question. And I don't want to get into, I realize there's some, I'll take the blame, a lack of clarity even on the submitted, memo. And the hope was we could work on those things. And so if as Josh said, if the group feels that no, these have to be dedicated monitoring wells, that's helpful input for us to then put together a plan to meet the board's requirements. I do want to clarify, you never eliminate uncertainty in models. You don't. Models have uncertainty. That's part of models. The point in showing that the data right now, or the model right now, and the results that the model shows, is that we're within the error bounds. That means the effect of these are de minimis compared to the measurable objective. I mean, to put it in context, the measurable objective for drawdown, I believe, is 50 feet. And I believe Dr. Weinberger showed ours being 0.3 to 0.7, okay? Those are critical pieces of data. And I agree that more data is going to help refine those results, but you never eliminate uncertainty with a model. Well, monitoring, though, will help understand how are we doing with respect to sustainability. Totally agree on that.
Well, I think what I heard from Dudek earlier is that when you have actual physical monitoring wells to collect data of water elevation, you're not relying on the model anymore. You actually have actual data, right? Is that correct?
I do agree with that, exactly. So
that's what I was asking, right?
Okay.
It's not with the monitoring well, dedicated monitoring wells, we're no longer relying on the model, the uncertainty, because we have actual data now. Is that correct?
Yeah.
If we use dedicated monitoring wells.
But I want to clarify, because I feel like we're in a court here.
Well, it's unclear what you guys are proposing. I'm trying to clarify. I mean, Would the better approach be, we have a special meeting and you guys come back with a more clear proposal? Because as you recognize, there's obviously a clear miscommunication between your team and the GSA team on what that proposal is, what your clarification you're seeking. So
the clarification we're seeking today is that we are not outside the boundaries of what you've put in the proposal, which we believe is correct. We would like to go above and beyond and commit, and even commit financial resources going forward to help with future monitoring of the subbasin. I don't believe that can be negotiated now, or it's going to take you guys to figure out your overall plan, and then we are happy to be contributors. I have to add to your point, the 0.6 to 1 foot of drawdown, your point about, well, what if all 6 decide to do that? Well, that would be 6 feet of drawdown, right? 6 or 7 feet of drawdown. We're talking about is that a fair?
Probably not.
I'm not sure.
We can't speak to that
Yeah,
at this point, but
my
the
point
point
is
is it have to be managed at that point.
it has to be managed, and it's also, I could be wrong, are we not we were unadjudicated land? Isn't it first come, first served for who puts their well in the ground?
that is not a sustainable way to manage your basin.
No, I'm not.
That was-
No, I'm not.
That's why Sigma was there.
What are we getting at here?
I'm not going to continue that point, just to make one statement, which is why is Hillcrest different than the other 5 golf courses? It's because Hillcrest received a permit to construct wells. They spent millions doing so. They didn't do anything wrong in this process. It was not their obligation to get the verification. It was the county's. So we are not like those other golf courses. And if at some point in the future, Hillcrest would say, hey, we want to drill yet another well, then whatever those new procedures are absolutely apply. But that's not this case, because this case was done 6 months before you guys even had procedures of verifications. So it's easily to distinguish this one from the others.
I think the fact that you're doubling or pumping doesn't change how that's any different in the impact on the basin, because if you look at the water budget, we're already over about 100 acre feet. With the increased pumping, that pushes from 100 to 300 acre feet. And I stated last meeting, we're moving in the wrong direction to sustainably manage the basin. This isn't an argument about water rights. This is to manage a basin sustainably. That's our responsibility. Our responsibility isn't water rights and what you see from the ground, right? It's how much you're extracting from the ground. So I guess if we not open to the idea, right, if you guys think your proposal is this and you want the board, and I think Director Welch haven't even seen or read this, is that what we're taking action on here?
Again, we were expecting, and again, I will just go back to the comment, we look forward to hearing from the GSA representatives in advance of the October 18th meeting, is that we don't know what's best, and we don't get the sense, quite frankly, that you're clear what you need yet. And that's okay. These things take time, and we want to support that. But you're asking us to just, do you want us to throw out a number? Do you want us, I don't understand what exactly is going to meet your requirements. And so, again, we will happily contribute now towards 3 to 5 test wells, let's call it. We will commit to monitoring, and that program I think we have to develop, because our preference would be to try to use our existing wells, but if we determine we cannot get useful data, I think we would be open to that. But again, that's sort of separate from what we're trying to accomplish right now. I hear what you're saying about doubling, and again, we want to monitor it, but is your plan to close all the golf courses in the city?
Could I make a recommendation for the board to consider that what I'm hearing is based off the modeling, and it's within the thresholds or the inconsistencies of the model trend, depending on what they're proposing for their pumping. There are unknown impacts at this point that we could implement additional monitoring wells down the road that Hillcrest is committed to either financially supporting or doing on our own. If we could maybe move forward with the understanding that we would find that they're consistent with the model, that we would develop maybe a subcommittee to explore those future impacts and develop those mitigation measures. at a later date or, work together to develop those. I mean, I would feel comfortable with that.
So my question to you, Director Welch, is how do we hold them accountable?
Well, I mean, I think we're here today to say it's consistent with the model. I don't see anything that says they're not consistent. I understand that there are future concerns, but I hear a commitment that they're willing to work with us on that. I don't know, maybe we could ask our legal counsel, how do you hold them accountable?
Right, I think what we could do is, we could have what's called a statement of official action, which is to say that we could make a decision of whatever it is, and then subject to whatever conditions. For example, the finding of sustainability lasts through 1 year, right? And then they have to renew it based upon whatever information. So you could have like the official statement of whatever your action is with conditions. You would have to outline what those conditions are to us so that we can memorialize that. But again, if you feel you're not ready now, the other option is to continue it and flesh that out with the proposal. The attorneys perhaps could get together and come back with a statement of official action with proposed conditions based upon your direction. Something you could do. I mean, if we had known, this is all new for all of us, because usually you have template conditions, and we just don't have that developed yet. So
I also would agree with that approach. There's some conditional approval with the understanding that there's a commitment on Hillcrest to utilize the 3 on-site wells and explore 2 off-site, with the premise being it's all based on the data and what we see over time as far as impacts to the basin. We don't disagree with that approach. It's consistent with what's in the executive order. The ask being, is the application inconsistent? I've yet to be convinced that it's inconsistent.
Vice Chair.
So if the board were to decide that the proposal is not inconsistent, does Hillcrest then complete the wells and then we worry about monitoring wells? I'm not sure of the timing. How does this work? If we were to say it's not, that the project is not inconsistent, but you can't complete the wells until we come to some sort of agreement on
Probably can't.
monitoring?
Pumping? Start pumping?
Because
yeah, this is within your discretion, but you could conceivably have them come back with reporting, whatever requirements you want to impose on them.
So it's up to us to decide.
And have the duration of the not inconsistent finding only last for X period of time to give everyone time to evaluate. Just an idea, these are just ideas. Again, this is within purview to.
And maybe we're jumping the, I don't want to use a violent analogy here. Maybe we're jumping the line here. Maybe we're cutting in front of the line here. Maybe we first need to decide whether or not the project is inconsistent, and then we worry about what conditions there would be. Like, you have to approve the EIR before you approve the project. So, technically you're doing them both at the same time, but formatting, you do the EIR first. Do we do an inconsistency determination first, and then we can determine if we need to do conditions? Because if the board finds it is inconsistent, then who cares about the conditions? But if the board finds it's not inconsistent, then we need to worry about the conditions. Doesn't it depend on whether or not we find the project consistent or inconsistent? How we move forward?
The narrow, basically, order said that you need to find whether it is inconsistent with, as they pointed out, sustainable groundwater management program established in any applicable sustainability. It's not whether you wish they wouldn't pump more, you wish they would use something else. It's whether, based on the technical data, it is inconsistent. I think that's ultimately a technical question as to monitoring whatnot. I think you can condition it, and perhaps, I think last time you had told them to come back, and they came back, and they were supposed to work, maybe that didn't work out the way it was supposed to, I wasn't involved in that process. But there are ways to do it, there's also existing litigation, you could do it through a settlement of that existing litigation, that's one other option the board could take, or come back another time, you can hash it out here, there are multiple legal options we have.
So I'm gonna try to summarize my thoughts and my recommendation on this for you all. So, and then we could discuss and go from there. Right, so I'll try to do this quickly. I know we're well beyond our scheduled time. So I just want to quickly recap what we're talking about, right? Hillcrest is proposing to increase their groundwater pumping to get off imported water or water served by the current water purveyor, right? Increasing from 215 to 425, 30 or so acre feet. So essentially doubling their pumping in a medium priority basin that's designated by DWR as a drinking water aquifer. This is in what they have described as their efforts to reduce their water demand to have drought resilient turf or landscaping. However, I find that to be somewhat flawed because it required treatment through reverse osmosis, in fact, wasting 20% of that water for drought resilient landscaping. To me, that's not very drought resilient when you have to waste 20% of the water to irrigate this using drinking water aquifer, right? And as I stated already, the water is over the water budget and we're pushing this in the wrong direction. And there's also potential, even those within the uncertainty, potential for seawater intrusion, impact on nearby remediation, and to decrease interbasin flows, right? So what we had discussed last meeting was to address and eliminate this uncertainty by collecting actual data. And as documented in the meeting minutes is through 3 dedicated monitoring wells around the Hillcrest well field and 1 monitoring well for seawater intrusion and 1 monitoring well for the West Coast Basin for interbasin flows, right? And also like to add for the record, in our GSA's well verification procedures under 5B, it does state that additional monitoring well requirements may be imposed, including but not limited to installation of dedicated monitoring wells, right? And also in our GSP in section 3.2, it also states sustainability indicators for which there are data gaps or too little data to fully evaluate the related undesirable result, in this case, the uncertainty, will be further defined by development implementation of additional monitoring through GSP implementation. So what my thoughts is that the consistency, if that's where we're going, to make sure we are protecting the basin in a sustainable manner, is the condition to install 3 dedicated monitoring wells around the well field so we know the immediate impacts that their additional pumping, double the pumping, has on our basin because we lack data in that area of our basin, and this would gather actual data. The reason why I'm opposed to using production wells, and once again, you could argue, but I didn't find it as a standard for monitoring well under DWR's bulletin. Production wells is not a typical monitoring well as defined by DWR's best practices. And that to use a production well, it doesn't allow you to collect data from multiple stream intervals, which your wells are, to determine the impacts between different layers of the basin. So you're just looking at an average head in your well. You are not actually accurately assessing the impacts on the different layers of your well, right? So that's why production well is not standard practice and dedicated monitoring wells are, right? So that's my proposal would be, it's consistent with the GSP if they install the 3 monitoring wells around the well field so we eliminate that uncertainty, right? To me, that would be consistent because they are doubling their wells. Their drought resilient grass has to drink water and waste 20% of it, which I find still troubling, right? But to eliminate that uncertainty and end all this argument, I think, to me, what's most important is those 3 monitoring wells around the well field, and we could discuss the seawater intrusion interbasin monitoring well at a future date. That is what I would propose as a motion to the board. I welcome your thoughts.
I think that sounds reasonable.
My suggested motion, because that was a lot, would be a little bit more clear. Again, conditional approval subject to all the things we talked about today. Repurposing of those 3 wells, confirming that, yes, they can be utilized, with the addition, not to be ignored, the possibility of 2 offsite wells. And then that be the basis for this board to look at data over time so that we could assess, evaluate, and adjust accordingly.
So my only clarification to that is that the 3 wells, there was like 3 dedicated wells, not using the production wells, correct? Okay.
Wait,
So that's a
are
friendly
you in agreement?
No, we're just agreeing, I'm just clarifying that's what it means.
Yeah. So, and I say that to some extent because I know the idea of a special meeting was floated. I don't think we're gonna get better analysis from DUDEC or from Hillcrest. We've seen now multiple iterations of a presentation of impacts.
Yeah.
I've seen enough, and I just go back to the presentation from DUDEC. It's within the uncertainty of the model for the 210 acre feet of additional pumping. I don't think that's gonna change unless we have better data, which they're willing to provide us. So I'm convinced that there can be kind of a middle ground working relationship with Hillcrest, that yes, conditional approval contingent on A, B, and C.
Director Walsh.
I would fall in line with that same recommendation that we would give conditional approval with the commitment and the continued monitoring and implementation of those monitoring plans.
So this goes to Vice Chair, sorry.
Yeah,
Vice Chair.
it's board
Apologize.
discussion right now. I'm hearing a lot about the technicalness and the model that and sustainable management program established in the GSP. The GSP is a sustainable management program, and it has been established because we, as a board, have adopted it. So it's not just technical and what do the numbers say? This is also a policy decision because the goal of the plan, which is a policy document, the goal of the plan in Sigma is to ensure the continued sustainability of our local groundwater resources and to promote projects that support this goal. And on the face of it, I don't know how doubling pumping, regardless of the number, I don't know how that supports the goal of sustainability of our local groundwater resources. In that 21 September 2023 letter, Hillcrest talks about reducing the use of imported water. Yeah, it reduces the use of imported water and trades that for using local groundwater. It improves the water supply resiliency of the city of Los Angeles. Well, I'm concerned with the Santa Monica Subbasin. That's my concern sitting on the board. And it is fully compatible with potential management actions in the basin, which would increase societal benefits to all parties. I have no idea what that means. I don't know what societal benefits to all parties means, but what I know is that the goal of the GSA and Sigma promoting projects that support the goal for sustainability for our local groundwater resources is not achieved by doubling your on-site pumping. There's also a comment in the letter about if any impacts or conflicts were to arise in the future, the GSP describes potential new programs that could remedy any impacts. Really? How do we know? You talk about inconsistency in the model, which again, this isn't an either or. It's not just what do the numbers look like, it's what is our policy goal? That's the whole point of Sigma. It starts at policy and then you get to the numbers to decide. It's like a puzzle, and there's a picture on the outside of the box. And the picture on the outside of the box is the policy. And the instructions inside are the numbers, are the plans. But you have to look at the overall picture. And that's what Sigma and our GSP do. We can't wait for, gosh, let's get some numbers from you twice a year as to whether we've exceeded some threshold or objective that we voted on last year, that we submitted in our plan. That, to me, that's not, to me, that's, well, I'll find another word. To me, that doesn't make any sense. You need to start with the policy, and then you can get down to the numbers. But the policy, this project doesn't even meet as far as I'm concerned. Talk about there's a monitoring solution. Let's do some on-site monitoring. But again, by the time that we get the numbers, how do we know that we would be able to reverse any issues? We don't. There's inconsistency with the model. There's uncertainty with the model. So just because we have a threshold doesn't mean that that's sacrosanct. You know, it's not 2 + 2 = 4. It's a guess. So we would be taking a guess as to the sustainability of our groundwater basin in the future. I will say I agree with Hillcrest that as much as I would love to have seawater intrusion monitoring well, near Marina Del Rey, and let's have another monitoring well down in the Bayona wetlands. I would love to have that, but I don't see a nexus between requiring Hillcrest to put those in and filling our data gaps. So I'm not in favor of requiring those wells. If you want to be benevolent and give us some money for those, great, thank you very much. But I don't see the nexus for it. As a hearing officer, that's not a condition that I would impose. Hillcrest says they've gone above and beyond other golf courses. I think we saw a presentation earlier that shows that you haven't. So I take that with a grain of saltwater management program salt. And again, technical, it just can't be death by 1,000 cuts. You come in and ask, and then somebody else comes in and asks, and somebody else comes in and asks. We have to start with the picture, with the overall picture. We can't continue to do, you can come in and pump until now we realize there's a problem. We need to start with our policy, which is we need to ensure the continued sustainability of the groundwater resources in this basin. I am not in favor of the proposal. I believe that the project is inconsistent with the groundwater sustainability plan, and that would be my vote. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Director Secretary, anything you want to add?
I agree with everything Vice Chair said. Again, I didn't hear that there were other avenues really looked into in terms of water capture or other ideas to save water besides moving forward with the well. Having said that, you have moved forward with the well. I know that that's why we're here, because it was permitted. So that sort of informed why I was open to a compromise motion. We do have to vote unanimously. So based on what Vice Chair is saying, that kind of tells us where we're at. But I do agree with everything you said. I think it is more than technical in terms of consistency, that we're supposed to be, managing the groundwater, and that's every single element that comes forward. And you're not looking to shut down every golf course. Again, the Riviera Golf Course is proposing another option besides additional groundwater. So I think there are other ways.
Yeah, just to add to that point, Director Singletary mentioned, about shutting down the golf course. I mean, the other thing that I find troubling too, not only is the RO wasting 20% of the water, is that if you look at a total pumping of 400 some acre feet of water, if you look at the statistics, a typical golf course in California, about 110 acres, uses 250 acre feet of water a year, 90 million gallons, right? You can find that. There's a reference for that. I believe your site's 100 acres, yet you're using twice the amount of that. So I'm struggling why a typical average golf course in California of the similar size uses half the water that you guys do. Do you respond to that? No, it's a statement, right? It's not a question. It's a statement why the use of water I find troubling. Not only are we feeding with RO permeate water, we're also using double the amount of a typical golf course at this location as well. So I mean,
If I could just add to something that Director Singletary said, county doesn't always do things correctly. I know that's a surprise to people in the room here, certainly a surprise to me, but in the past, again, I'm a planner, and if a permit was approved that should not have been approved, which did happen on occasion, county council advised us once, just because we did it wrong in the past, doesn't mean you continue to do it incorrectly in the future. And just because a permit may have been issued incorrectly in the past, doesn't mean we continue with that and let it go just because we did something wrong in the past. So I just want to make sure, just because something was done wrong in the past, doesn't mean you let it go or that you don't do it correctly in the future.
Vice Chair. So, I think that's all. Any other points, any other board member want to provide? I guess at this point, we motion.
We need to take a vote.
Yeah, we motion for a vote.
I'll just repeat myself. My motion is conditional approval, subject to, and we can explicitly talk about that.
Yeah, could we maybe clarify the motion?
Okay, so I'm gonna try to, I believe that the attorneys in the room, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong in wording, but I believe the executive order, we try to use that language that
It's verification.
verification, we
Conditional
find the verification consistent with conditional.
Not inconsistent.
Not inconsistent, or is it consistent?
Not
inconsistent. Double negative. Is that correct? It's not
inconsistent.
Approval of a permit for a new groundwater well or for alteration of an existing well in the basin subject to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and classified as medium or high priority without first obtaining written verification from a groundwater sustainability agency managing the basin or the area of the basin where the well is proposed to be located, that groundwater extraction by the proposed well would not be inconsistent with any sustainable groundwater management program established in any applicable groundwater sustainability plan adopted by that groundwater sustainability agency and would not decrease the likelihood of achieving a sustainability goal for the basin covered by such a plan.
I'm gonna try to phrase, or you wanna try? I wanna try to phrase your motion.
So the question is the well application
Not
inconsistent? And I'll just paraphrase. And the motion that I would propose is to provide conditional approval to that ask, subject to Hillcrest's proposed recommendations for monitoring. I would add, I think evaluation is necessary, and maybe a report back to this board from DUDEC as far as the assessment of the impacts. And there be some understanding from Hillcrest that they're acknowledging that premise is that, yes, you can start conditional approval, we'll monitor data, and we'll work together on evaluating the impacts. I try to simplify it, but even that was confusing.
I think to clarify, because you had a question earlier there on the, I think you're saying as they propose monitoring for their production wells,
Correct.
which is different than the motion here.
That's right, correct. So I'm gonna amend that motion.
But
Okay.
do we need to vote on that before it's?
Well, if you can propose an amendment, if it's friendly to the maker, that's one thing. If it's not friendly, then it becomes a substitute motion, which you would have to vote on the substitute motion first. If that does not pass, then we go back to the original motion.
Okay, so I'll propose a friendly amendment. All right.
Do you find it friendly?
We're so confused at this point. What is what? So the proposal that is not inconsistent with the GSP to the condition of that they install 3 dedicated monitoring wells around the well field and to have future discussions on with the GSA in supporting the additional monitoring wells for seawater intrusion and intermediate flows. So that would be my friendly amendment. You accept it, Madam Chair?
I accept.
It's friendly to the maker.
So that is the motion on the floor. Do you have a second? I'll second. So motion by Director.
And then you've amended it, and then you're seconding.
Wait, dude, so if I amended, he accept, that's still his
It's a
motion?
friendly amendment, so it's still with the amendment, that's what you're.
Okay.
Okay, and then I'm.
So then you're seconding it, okay.
Can you second your own amendment?
I don't know if you
think
can second, can you second your
If it's a
amendment?
friendly amendment,
To his motion though. So he was still making the motion accepting this.
okay,
It's so
to
confusing.
be safe for another.
Yeah.
Okay,
is
all right,
there-
I'll take my second.
Is there anybody else that can second it? Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second, Mr. Singletary has seconded it. I will take a roll call vote.
Sorry, before you do that, it's GSA, are you guys clear on that until we document the motion before we vote?
We have this recorded.
Okay.
And we have all written down, I think, our versions,
Okay.
our understanding.
Just double checking before we.
We'll confer with council as to the wording of that
Okay.
motion specifically, if that's okay with council. Okay. So, Director Welsh,
Yes.
Director Gonzalez, obviously, Vice Chair Natoli,
Yay.
Vice Chair Singletary, yes. So we do not have unanimity on that. So do we need another motion?
Proposed amendment? Or proposed motion?
I'm out of ideas. I mean. Is that the end of the item, then if there's no proposal, it just doesn't pass.
Nothing is, there's no action taken.
Recommendation.
The motion did not pass.
Motion did not pass, and
The
we
motion
require
fails.
unanimity.
So there's no verification.
So does anyone want to hazard another motion?
Sounds like you believe it's not consistent. So
I believe it is inconsistent. But we don't need a motion for that because the motion to find it not inconsistent didn't pass, right?
Right.
So you don't need us, something to put it.
It just doesn't pass.
Back to the
What's
regular
next on the
agenda.
agenda?
Yeah, that closes
So
the
I'm
agenda
gonna,
item.
I'm gonna propose further agenda management given the time. I'm gonna propose to continue item 8D, item 9A to the next meeting. But I would like to continue 9B because the grant application is together in a month. It would be helpful to have the letter support from the GSA.
I second the motion.
Okay,
We'll call vote on the management.
yeah. I don't know that you need necessarily a vote on it, but
do you think, could we talk about that? Do you think the cost share is gonna be among, I don't want to belabor the meeting, but it's something we can.
I'm the only one that got direction. Okay, did you guys get direction? Yeah.
I would follow Director Welch's direction, so.
So we'll do, what is it, 9A and B then? We'll push 8D to next meeting.
okay, but you do want to regroup on 9A and B.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you for your time and consideration. I think this is unfortunate. I think it actually takes us in a bad direction, but I understand you have to vote the way your conscience is. So thank you again for your time.
Conscience? Push back on that.
Okay.
9A today?
Yes, so the next item on our agenda is 9A, cost sharing plan between GSA members. Again, this was continued from the July 19th GSA board meeting.
So I think we've seen that, it's in the board pack with the division, I guess let's just go around and talk about direction that each member agency has received. We'll start. Director Welch?
I'll start, yeah. Yeah, so we received direction from our city council, and the direction is that they are in favor of a cost share that would fall in line with the percentage of the plan area. And that cost share would be applicable for all costs associated, not just administrative, it would be all costs associated with our participation in the GSA. And I'm sorry, including legal costs. We got specific direction, including legal costs.
So our discussion is not at the council level, so I would agree that for the administration, that breaking it down per land area makes sense. The legal costs, I don't have direction on that, and I wouldn't necessarily agree to a land use split for that one.
The county is amenable either way, whether it's percentage of land use or whether it's divided by 5. For legal, since we're all individually liable, I think that would probably remain.
So 2 points. First is LA is willing to equally split, because obviously there's extremes. And what I mean by that is I wasn't present, obviously, I'm a board member, but I looked at the April 19th minutes when this item was discussed. And in April, there was 3 options floated, the 2 shown here, and then the third option being it based on pumping, which again, as we all know, is the opposite extreme of one agency incurring the brunt of the cost, the lion's share. So we're trying to not operate in this extreme fashion, but rather say we think it's fair for all party to this GSA, let's equally split the cost of operating the GSA. So our recommendation and motion would be to equally split.
I would say that the county believes that we all have an equal voice on the board and we all have an equal, it's equally important to all of us to ensure that groundwater in the basin remains sustainable. So our preference would be an even split, but again, we're fine with whatever the will of the majority of the board is.
I'll just chime in. We're carrying the costs all on our own currently, so we're either one makes no difference to us. Santa Monica is prepared to pay for all these costs moving forward on both administration and, implement the projects. But, in terms of the equal split, I think that's the most fair because we do have equal votes. It's not a weighted vote system here, like Metropolitan Board, for example, has, right? So we have equal share, equal say, and equal split. That's my thoughts.
If I could just add, for DWP legally, any financial decision has to go to the DWP board.
Right.
And it would be typically limited to a finite amount of time and a certain cash cost. The DWP board is unlikely to agree to, an unknown amount.
Right, I think at this point for us would be the administrative cost, because that is what we find.
Yeah, this is a 5-year MOA that we're discussing.
Right, yeah, 5 years.
It would have to be the terms of the MOA that would have to ostensibly become before this board, and then DWP would take it to its board, and I assume
Yeah,
there
all
would
of
be a
us
similar
would.
process, yeah, similar to how the initial MOU was negotiated and taken into court for city council as the case may be.
Well, given that all of us shared our opinion, I don't think we're gonna get anywhere with the vote right now. So, let's move on to that. We'll continue this, because you guys got direction.
Yeah, we already have direction from our city council, but obviously, we could discuss if there is a majority approach different from our city council. I would have to go back to our city council for further direction.
So just for my clarification, these options were discussed.
Those options were discussed, as well as the option of the pumping option. We also discussed that.
Is there room with others to vote on this right now? What you guys recommend? We're not gonna come to agreement on this right now anyways.
Yeah, I don't know how we're going to reach an agreement in the future if that's the direction from Beverly Hills Council. So we just continue operating as we are in Santa Monica, bearing the costs, and if we don't want to push to I guess we would just not be able to be unanimous today, so yeah, there's no point in discuss it.
Does it have to be one or the other? Could we do, the county is willing to do $35,503.20 a year, and Beverly Hills does $3,504 per year, and could it be, you can pick one of the two, because the pumping,
What do you want to
I don't
contribute
think
to?
pumping, I don't think there's, but, you know, something to show that we're committed other than staff time, that agency resources are also committed to this. Just a thought, just a thought.
I mean, I guess it's more a question for all the legal one. Is it? I mean, it probably gets even more messy. Like, we all have different financial contribution from different agencies. Say, for example, Beverly Hills, I said they got direction to pay the 2%, but their 2% is split across everything, not just administrative costs. Right. So that would be how much they're willing to chip in, and then say, I don't know, I'm just using that one, maybe LA County equal share on everything. Like, it's just different financial contribution, and then muddy the waters even more.
Unanimous consent.
Yeah, so it would be essentially, we vote on everybody contributing different things to the pot. So
yeah,
from my perspective as a city that's currently shows all that cost, is at least we get some of the contribution from other agencies on what they're willing to contribute. Like, for example, LA contributes their 25% share. Beverly Hills contributes 2% across the board on everything. Sorry, not. Oh, sorry. You gotta pick up their slack. I'm taking them out of the equation, so it's not 25% across the board.
If Santa Monica is volunteering to take up the slack, it makes it easier for people to just say what their contribution is.
Right. So is that if they're saying, you know, they have different financial.
Everybody agrees to that structure, and there's unanimous consent.
Okay. So maybe I want to table that. Everybody think about that. Come back next meeting, right? With what everybody's gonna come back with 0%. So, I mean, to me, that's just continue the item, come back, and then see what each agency will contribute next meeting. That just make this even more interesting. Like,
and just a clarification, so we would come up with I guess, the draft agreement, like an MOA, and then that would then have to go through each entity's process for approval.
You were saying it goes to the GSA first, and then, like, we agree on that, and then it goes to our respective governing bodies then for approval and sign off. Or is it the other way around?
For DWP, it would be, we need an agreement that we can take to our board.
So
So
we need
it
to
would
vote.
make more sense if the agreement was agreed upon by this
Right,
body
as
before we
before,
took it, yeah.
right?
Okay, so
And
we-
then we would take it back to our respective legislative bodies for approval.
Okay, so everyone can think about that, and we'll continue this next week.
Can I just ask if there's any direction to staff or to do that?
No direction. Unless you have other creative ideas.
Just want to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Do you have public comments on this item?
We have no more public comments.
Okay. We wore them out.
Yes,
This sounds like our council meeting now. Last
Yeah.
item, 9B.
Yes, 9B.
Alex, are you still there?
Wait a minute, who has to come back?
Alex is still, yeah, do we want him to be promoted as panelist? Okay.
Some bathroom breaks a lot of these. I would just ask the presenter to be as brief as possible.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right. Yeah, I stuck in there. Let's see. Jane, or I'm not sure who else would be sharing the slides.
I think Amy's going to be sharing the slides.
Amy. Okay, great. All right. Well, once again, I'm Alex Wade. I'm the supervising civil engineer for water resources. And I know we had a fun conversation just now about money. Well, here's an opportunity for some free money. I'm coming to talk about item 9B. So this is a GSA support letter for U.S. Bureau of Reclamation grant. Next slide, please. This is just an overview of what we're talking about. I know it's been a long meeting, so I'm going to go rather quickly. If you could advance to the next slide. So this is the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation grant opportunity that we are working on. So this is the Water Smart Drought Response Program, Drought Resiliency Projects for fiscal year 2024. And so the projects that we are referencing are through tasks A through C, so increasing the reliability of water supplies through infrastructure improvements, groundwater recovery, as well as improved water management. And so if we go to the next slide, the project that we are proposing for this grant opportunity is a replacement of groundwater production well SM4. Unfortunately, this well is at the end of its useful life. It's been in production for over 40 years, excuse me, and needs to be replaced. Also, where this well is located is right smack dab in the middle of the contamination plume underneath the Olympic well field. So this is actually the primary capture point for that contamination plume. So replacing this well is really a high priority to maintain overall resiliency and flexibility in our groundwater pumping, as well as to maintain that groundwater contamination plume capture. Next slide, please. So some really key points here about this resiliency and remediation project. This project will not increase the overall pumping in the Olympic well field. We are replacing the existing well in kind. And that existing groundwater production well, SM4, once the new well is built, this existing well will be decommissioned and destroyed. And all this information, including the new well and the destruction of the existing, are included in our CEQA documentation. And as I mentioned, the implementation of this will maintain that contamination plume, as well as the other project benefits that you see here. Next slide, please. So finally, the recommended action is to approve the support letter that was incorporated as part of the GSA board packet for this meeting. And so asking the GSA to support the city's grant application for the USBR Water Smart grant opportunity. Any questions?
Any questions? Vice Chair?
Sorry, yes, I'll try and make them quick. Why is this considered a groundwater production well when it's used for contamination plume capture?
Yep. So these wells, so all three of the wells in the Olympic well field are permitted under the Division of Drinking Water's 97005 process memo, which deals with the capture and treatment of extremely impaired drinking water sources. So although it is capturing contaminated water, we are treating it to a very high level to remove that contamination and use it for drinking water supply. And that permit amendment is actually in the works right now with the Division of Drinking Water, and we expect to have that permit amendment approved next spring.
Okay. And then how does the project support increasing groundwater recharge in the Olympic subbasin?
Yep, absolutely. So without that well, the zone of capture for groundwater recharge actually gets limited to the two existing wells, and they can only pump so much. So without that additional well to draw more water out of the well field, we actually lose that recharge water to who knows where. So that's why having that third well there allows us to capture as much water as possible as we recharge into that Olympic subbasin.
If I may, the contamination currently exists in 2 of the 3 zones. So by pulling, extracting, cleaning up, removing that, you do free up that 2 zones in the future for us to recharge in those zones.
Okay, so that sounds like it goes to my last question, which is how does the project enhance groundwater pumping distribution between well fields, and why is that desirable?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you know, the city of Santa Monica only pumps from 3 of the 5 subbasins in the city. So without the ability to draw water from one of those basins, we have to pull more water from another subbasin. So if we are able to replace existing wells at the end of their useful life, we increase that reliability and resiliency to drop the amount of water we're pumping from one zone and pull it from another. And over time, we can manipulate that influence so that way we're not drawing on any sub-basin disproportionately than another.
Very good, thank you.
Any other questions?
So for the It's just a like for like. You're not increasing any pumping.
Absolutely.
And for a replacement well, does it also have to come to the GSA for approval?
Are you referencing like the government order?
Yeah.
No,
Drinking.
because it's a like-for-like replacement. It's not
Okay.
increasing pumping, it's also for municipal drinking water use.
So it doesn't come forward to us at a future date. This is just, you're going forward for the grant, gives you grant support.
Yeah. Any other questions? Does anyone want to make a motion? Yes. Oh.
I move that we approve the support letter for the city of Santa Monica's USBR grant application.
Second.
Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. Chair White,
Yes.
Vice Chair Tully,
Aye.
Member Singletary.
Yes.
Member Welch.
Yes.
Member Gonzalez. Thank you. Passes.
And this adjourns the meeting at, no?
Solicitation.
Oh, yes, we still have.
Do we want to postpone that or 10, item 10? I forgot to manage that one.
Do you want to make it clear, item 10 is only for board members?
It is only for board, we have no public comment, but yes, it is only for board members. I did see that you requested a presentation,
From Riviera.
from Riviera,
I think
correct?
Director Walsh, you had a request on time, right?
Yeah, I request we visit potentially starting earlier on future meetings, an 8 o'clock or a 9 o'clock start time.
Yeah.
What time would you like it? 'Cause I'm.
Well, I think we're
Look at this
agendizing
room.
for discussion.
Yeah, I don't know.
For discussion.
Yeah, because you're gonna have to probably investigate when rooms are available and things.
I just booked this room as we speak.
Just a question for GSA consultant, the future dates of the meeting, it hasn't been published yet for next year, right? Date and time, has that been published?
I need to double check. I believe that we did agree on January 17th of 2024
Okay,
as the last published. I have to double check that.
but we could still change the time on that.
The time can change, but yes, at the next meeting, we will absolutely bring before you
So
a
it's after
calendar
that
for
meeting
the,
then.
for meetings for the
Some
following
recommended
year.
times.
Oh,
Yeah.
so we'll,
So that meeting will
January
still
for 10
hold,
a.m.
we're gonna discuss
You
at that
you
meeting.
can change the time.
as I'm saying, do you want to change it?
I would
date
recommend
right now
an
is
8
January.
o'clock
start.
start time.
I'm good with that.
Okay, Director.
I'm good with
Secretary?
8.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
Director,
okay.
8 AM start time? Everybody, aye.
Yeah. I'm booking this room as we speak.
And then this isn't an agenda, it's, well, sort of, for future agenda packets, if we could just ensure that we have, like, the documentation. I apologize, I did not see the email. I get, like everyone here, I'm sure, 800 emails a day. Yeah, a lot of them. But make sure that we have any valuable information, like you were referencing this memo, and I think it would have been important to include it in the packet.
In the board packet.
Yeah. And then maybe a follow-up email if somebody sends out, like, I understand they emailed all of the board members directly, if there could be a follow-up, because I don't know if that happened in this case. I could have
Wasn't
missed
directed
that.
to me. When you see, I sent you the forward, September 21st, the
The
email
problem
went
is we can't follow up.
Hillcrest to the board.
I don't know if
There's no way to,
Well, you could pose a question and BCC everyone and, and then
No,
whomever.
I don't think we should, I don't think we
No,
should
I-
should everybody.
No.
BCC.
Sending questions to each other.
No, not to
Maybe
each
just
other.
a
What I'm saying,
question.
if there's a one-way direct communication, the letter is sent and you BCC all of the board members, then you could follow up individually to board members to see that they received it. But
Jane, are you speaking of the secretary of the board doing that?
Yes.
Or DUDEC, not an individual board member sending?
correct.
okay.
So the question
And then-
is, of all the emails that I get from everyone, you're not asking for all of those emails to go into a board packet.
Well, maybe I should phrase,
That's it.
maybe this is more of a legal question, like,
Okay.
them sending, or Hillcrest just sending this out to board members, and, I mean, legally, I mean, is that something I'm required to review before the agenda?
No.
That's my first question.
No, it's like a public comment.
And I guess then, as a follow-up, if Santa Monica or whomever is discussing things thinks that this is an actionable item that needs to be part of the packet, I think, okay. You were having discussions with
It was because it was on their, they put it on their slide, so I was responding to.
No, before the meeting, there was some email correspondence
That
or
wasn't the
something. Oh,
That wasn't the thing. That was a secretary and.
Can I
the
clarify
district consultant.
what I think happened?
For the record.
There was email communication between DUDAC and Geosyntac following a meeting that's referenced in this letter.
okay.
And that email communication was Geosyntac to DUDAC and to Dr. Gold. Then, a month after that, roughly, Hillcrest sent this letter as an attachment directly to the board members. I was not included on that. We didn't, and I apologize, we can absolutely include that sort of thing in the future. We didn't realize that they were going to reference it because their slides they gave to us right before the board meeting. So I should have recognized it would come up,
You
but
guys never received this to begin with.
I never got it.
So that's
So-
not a problem.
I sent it, let's see who was on the original email,
You-
go ahead.
Yeah,
This issue has come up before. I think that folks from the Grassroots Coalition had sent emails to everyone. It may be the best practice to the extent that when that does happen, those materials are just included in the board package so that it's transparent, everyone has them, they're publicly available.
So I do want to tell you that Grassroots Coalition submitted 120 pages on Saturday afternoon. So what we did was we put those 120 pages and 6 hours of YouTube videos on the GSA website in the public comment column. We have a column, so anything goes into that column. The question is, from that column, did you want the 120 pages in the board packet from Grassroots?
So I'm gonna make a proposal, right, because that's a policy, I think. I'm gonna agendize that for us to discuss at the next meeting as a policy, what we do with all this stuff, right? Because, in talking to our city clerk, what they do is when they get public comments, they'll attach it, resubmit it, send it to the city council up to a certain amount of time. Meaning like the day before the council meeting. And after that, everything they don't collect and file, right? Because it came in so short. So it's within reason that we'll try to post them after the fact, but then it's really hard to, as they're coming in and post them. So it's kind of like you accept everything up to this point, everything out at that point, then it gets uploaded.
I think you had that conversation.
Yeah,
and
don't we
there was
already
an
agree
agreement on it.
To post it, so it was,
But do we?
Grassroots was posted.
No, do we agree on like when the cutoff was?
Yeah, I think, but
'Cause I do
I think
kinda
part of the
remember that
problem
too.
was, is I think that's part of your bylaw changes, which we're not discussing, so that might be part of the.
But that wasn't,
But
I didn't see that as a proposed edit either.
I think you can give direction to come back with.
Yeah, I think that's what we're.
may I suggest one possible option is, whatever is board package, send that out. If there are extraneous materials, sending the board members a link, just an email link, here are, here's the board package, here are additional public comments which are available at the link, and then you can.
So
then go-
Grassroots, their issue is that they want every document that they hand you or email must be visible by other public members. They're not so concerned about board members, which is.
Yeah, I'm just talking about making sure the board members.
Oh,
have
the
what
board
they
members,
need.
yeah,
I'm
so
just talking about making
yeah.
sure they have what they need.
Okay.
I think it's maybe worthwhile to revisit that, not only like cutoff time, but what practice gets included and what should maybe live on the website too. Because otherwise it becomes a cumbersome website with all this info on there.
We have 3 pages of public comments on the tab.
So whatever, we got Riviera.
Yeah, so maybe
lead time,
agendize it for a future meeting.
Discussion of policy
And
on
circle back to
public
it.
comments. Any other? I thought you had one, that's what you pointed out.
Riviera.
Okay.
So that's a good question. I would need to know what to do when that went out, Thursday, September 21st, all the board members. The question is, what do you do with that document? IMCC one. So does it go onto the website or does it?
I know there was a long discussion about it, maybe we could look back at those
Okay.
prior meetings were recorded, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Or bring it up at another meeting if that's.
Just hold on to it for now.
Okay, got it.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. So, okay, now I can enjoy the
We're
meeting.
adjourned to when?
2:23 PM,
No, we're adjourned to what date?
January.
17th
At 8 o'clock, or 8 in the morning, 8 o'clock AM.
So I booked this room for 7 AM for